I hereby call to order this meeting of the District 200 School Board. Mrs. Hutchinson, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree.
Here.
Mrs. Erickson.
Here.
Mr. Cambiani.
Here.
Mr. Hamlin.
Here.
Mr. Matheson is not here. Mr. Paulson.
Here.
Mr. Broman.
Here. Mr. Mack, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. We do have a full agenda tonight. We normally have 2 board meetings in the month of May, but this month we're only having 1 so we can attend various honest programs at the end of the month. Therefore, I'm asking, are there any modifications to the agenda that anyone would like to make? Hearing none, we'll move to public comments on agenda items. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a question or comment on an agenda item. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. The board strives to make the best decisions for the district, and public input in a variety of venues is very helpful. The board must protect the civility and decorum of this meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of the board and the democratic process in your comments tonight. Please use the microphone. There's a microphone up on the podium. State your name and address your comments to the board. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Particularly, we're going to enforce that tonight in light of the number of people who have signed up for public comments on agenda items. Mr. Paulson will be keeping time and will be raising his hand at what, the 2.5 minute mark. Please be factual and courteous and do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board or staff. If you feel your matter needs to be discussed in more detail, please attend either the board's chance to chat or present the comments to us in writing. And so we will begin. The first person I have signed up for comments is Jay McCracken.
My name is Jay McCracken, and I want to thank the board for this opportunity to speak. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of my wife, Kim McCracken. We've lived in the Wheaton School District for 14 years. Several years ago, our older son graduated from Hubble Middle School. I want to thank you, board members, each one of you, for your public service and commitment to making our community as good as it can be. We appreciate that. Appreciate Superintendent Schuler was willing to meet with us last week, and we appreciate that. Thank you. We have much in common with you, desiring to see the young men and young women of our community develop their gifts and ability and become outstanding citizens and productive members of our community. I want to thank you for the policy that's been enforced for the last 18 years that has allowed homeschoolers to participate in athletics within our district at all levels. We called the IHSA in conversations with them. They are not aware of any investigation or violation regarding homeschoolers participating in IHSA activities or athletics in any district in the state of Illinois. It's my understanding that when this issue of homeschoolers participating in athletics came up 18 years ago, a committee was formed to address and create a new policy, a committee of board members, administration, and citizens. That policy was adopted and it's been enforced for 18 years. That committee wrote that policy and it's worked well for 18 years. A policy that is good for the whole community, a policy that is inclusive and non-discriminatory. I, on behalf of my wife, we would ask you to consider this approach again, establishing a committee of board members, administrators, and citizens that could address the change in this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCracken. The next person I have signed up to speak is Sydney Weststraight.
Mr. Broman, Dr. Schuler, members of the board, thank you for your time tonight. Sincerely, we're grateful. My name is Sydney Weststraight. I live at 923 Santa Rosa in Wheaton. The people you may have seen outside and the many people who are here today are members of our community who may have been affected in one way or another by the recent changes to the private school policy. We asked the board to enter into a dialogue, as Jay said, with the broader community to reconsider these changes and how it impacts our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weststraight. The next speaker I have is Leah Bowen.
Hi, my name is Leah Bowen. I've lived in District 200 for 12 years, and my husband was born and raised here. I got to work at Wheaton North High School as a science teacher and a tennis coach, and I absolutely loved my time there and still keep in touch with a slew of the teachers and coaches and former students. And now I get to stay home with my 3 little kids. I got to come to your last school board meeting, and I got so excited to hear about everything going on, like the week of learning and the Institute days. Clearly there's a lot of very good work done through this school board, and I do thank you for your time and your care. From what I understand, the update to policy 7.40 was and is ultimately up to you, the people on this board. I am here today, like so many others, to ask you to please reconsider. As you know, the IHSA does not have legal authority to determine educational policy, and eligibility is determined by the individual school board. So it is up to you. And from what I understand, the prior school board's approved policy was and continues to be in complete compliance with the IHSA bylaws. I've read that District 200 continues to welcome homeschoolers participation. And while I do hope that is the case, this policy update does show otherwise. I can say I welcome ice cubes in my home, but if I set my thermostat to 70 degrees, clearly I do not. My family has been a part of a homeschooling community for 3 years now. And also my oldest is a kindergartner at Hawthorne Elementary School. Interesting mix, I know. My husband and I love this Wheaton community, and we are invested in it. Wheaton has been a leader in how we can all work together for the good of all of the students in our community. This policy change brings division. Please reverse this change. And if that is difficult to do, I would like to know why, and if there is any way I can help. When I coached tennis at Wheaton North, we had a number of homeschoolers in the program, and it was a great experience all around. This school board is not a careless bunch. You guys are thinkers, and I saw evidence of these qualities at the last school board meeting. I do believe you have the Wheaton community's best interests at heart, and I'm confident you'll make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen. The next speaker I have is Gabby Resek.
Hello, thank you for your time again. You've already heard from me once, but I just have one more thing to say. I appreciate the time and consideration of the matter of policy 7.40. I'm sure the response from the community was a surprise, and I appreciate your willingness to engage with us. You have the ability to reinstate the previous policy 7.40, which has never caused any harm to any District 200 student, rather than implement the revised policy, which will most definitely hurt many District 200 students. Your mission is to inspire, educate, challenge, and support all students to reach their highest level of learning and personal development. I'm asking you as neighbors and fellow parents to do what's right and repeal the changes to policy 7.40. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Resek. And the next speaker I have is Amber Williams.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to ask you to reopen the discussion on policy 7.40. First of all, I appreciate that you guys have maintained such a generous policy in the previous 18 years. I lived in Wheaton for 17 years, and my husband Tad and I are active in the community, in our church, and we own our own small business. We have for 13 years here. And I've always heard that our district is very flexible and welcoming to people who have to either do hybrid school or need to privately educate their students or want to find an alternative for their children. So it was really sad to me when I heard that this policy was passed because it represents a change in the openness and cooperation among the community members and for our children. So I'm just asking that you please reconsider this decision.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Next speaker I have is Jan Shaw.
Hi there. Thanks for listening again. I'm going to switch subjects on you. First off, I do support the homeschoolers. I think it's a real pity that you put that out for public comment and then changed it, and then after the fact let people know who are actually affected by it. What I came to talk about tonight, though, is the teacher's contract. There's some good stuff in there. I see that you're giving the new teachers a little more money, the older teachers a little less. It's going to actually flatten out over time, if I looked at it right. However, I'm going to ask you to wait till next month to actually approve it. There's a couple things in there that bother me. First off, I was here a year ago and I suggested that if you wanted to have some money to do other things like building maintenance or building a degree school, you need to save some money. And since over 70%, maybe closer to 80%, goes to salaries and benefits, you got to look there. A year ago, when the administrative contracts renewed, I made the comment that one, the board needs to see the actual contract, not just the change, not just the highlights of the changes. Two, administrators should be paying their pensions just like teachers do. Three, what else was in there? End of career salary, I guess it's called post-employment compensation, where they get a lump sum at the end. It needs to go across the board, teachers and administrators. So anyway, looking at the teacher's contract, you still have end of career compensation. It's called post-employment compensation. If they work 18 years, they get $13,500 in a lump sum. The average teacher who's worked 25 or 30 years is going to be around $100,000 in salary. They're going to get a pension that starts around $67,000. They're going to get this lump sum if they work 30 years. It's going to be one that like 50. I'm not going to do my math in the top of my head. But it's $750 per year if they worked at least 18 years. And then the teacher replaces them, it's going to be somewhere around $44,000 when they start. In the highlights that you put in the board packet, it does not say anything about where a new teacher starts. That needs to be in there. It does not say anything about what this is going to do to the total package as far as the school board goes. If, let's say, assuming inflation was 2.5%, so that your things going up at that rate, since it's a flexible amount, how much is that going to cost the district? We really need to have some ballpark of what the contract is costing before we approve it. The end of career stuff should go. And then there's this little nuisance thing in there called sick leave bank. For those who don't know, they get 15 days per year for sick leave. It accumulates unlimited. At the end of their career, when they retire, 170 days is equivalent to 1 full year of service credit in computing the pension. They can get up to 2 years, so 340 days gives them 2 full years of pension padding. What you did in 2015 when the current contract was renewed, and it was not on the highlights, so it was never properly approved, but I didn't notice until a year or two later, is as the sick bank grows, the number of sick days they get per year grows. It starts out at 15. When sick bank gets 121 days, they get 17, and at the end, when you're up to 221 days in sick bank, you get 27. So please, don't approve the contract tonight, wait till next month.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Next speaker I have is Christine Hanya.
Just to clarify for everybody, I'm raising my hand at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and then again at 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Christine Kenya. I am a Warrenville South class of 2011 graduate. I received an excellent education in the Wheaton community. I started out here at St. Michael's School. Then in high school, I attended Warrenville South part-time while also being homeschooled. After that, I had the opportunity to attend Boston University on a scholarship, and I currently teach 8th grade up here in District 93, while also pursuing a master's in math at Aurora University. I'm concerned about policy 740 because it would have affected me and my 3 younger brothers who took that same course, attending some classes at the high school while also being homeschooled. I think this policy would erode the partnership between District 200 and the community that it serves, and it is not in the best interest of the students. Our schools have the privilege and the responsibility to partner with families to offer the best possible educational experience for all students, including opportunities for extracurricular involvement. As an educator, I watch parents making difficult decisions about what's best for their children, and I know that my parents did the same for me. For my brothers, it was sports. For me, it was choir, but we all received what we needed through that program. I would encourage the board to reconsider policy 740, and I would encourage so that the District 200 schools can continue to offer extracurricular opportunities to all of its stakeholders, including homeschoolers and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenya. The next speaker I have is Carrie Erickson.
Carrie Erickson, 1117 Wheaton Oaks Drive. I've lived in District 200 for 20 years. Dear members of the board, thank you for your time, listening, and considerations. I, along with others here this evening, am asking for the repeal of policy 740. We all have one goal and many ways to get there. Our district goal is to inspire excellence, inspire in everyone a passion to excel, and to support all students reaching beyond their potential. I would make an educated guess that also included in our goal is raising and educating all students up through high school so they are productive, trustworthy, and caring citizens wherever they find themselves after high school and beyond. One goal, many ways to get there. The reasons families choose to homeschool, either partially or fully, are many. A few, taking advantage of additional opportunities for children to learn hands-on. Being able to meet a child's needs perhaps in different ways outside of the school setting. Spending time with our children in the most formative years of their life. Once that window of time has passed, it is gone. Anyone who is a parent understands how precious time is. Lastly, some of us as parents have prior training or certification in education and simply want to have a part teaching our children. However, our goals are no different. To raise and educate our children to meet their needs and grow into productive, trustworthy, and caring citizens. One goal, many ways to get there. I grew up in the Lombard Public Schools, and upon entering Lombard East as a freshman, I was earning C's and D's across the board. I had very little direction. The best advice my mom gave me was, get involved. Choose something, anything, a sport, a club, whatever you choose, just get involved. I chose track. All 3 of my coaches became my mentors, simply by guiding, encouraging, and caring. All 4 of us keep in touch even now, 25 years later. By junior year of high school, I was earning A's and B's across the board and earned all state honors in the mile. The only reason I mention this is to stress the importance of extracurricular activities for children. It literally changed the trajectory of my life. It opened up possibilities in college and beyond and shaped the person that I am today. The question in my head right now is why would we withhold this from our children in our community simply because a family chooses to utilize other resources to meet the needs of their children? Why would we deny or make extremely difficult these opportunities for our children whose parents are tax-paying citizens and who will pay the activities fees for each year?
Ms. Erickson, we have 3 minutes to go.
Thank you.
Is it 2 minutes?
15 seconds. Go ahead. 15 seconds.
I'll be done.
Get your hand up.
I do not understand. What I do understand clearly is the ones who stand to lose the most in the implementation of this policy are the children in our community. One goal, many ways to get there. District 200 board members, please reconsider repealing policy 740. Thank you for your time and your reconsideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Erickson. Mr. Paulson and I will get our signals straight in.
Leave my hand up until the speaker sees me.
The next speaker I signed up is Susan Liskey. Is it Liskey?
My husband and 4 children have been Wheaton residents for 7 years. I am a professional educator, recently earning my doctorate at Wheaton College and now an adjunct professor at North Park University. With a bachelor's degree in secondary education, I have also taught in the public schools. For various reasons, including an evening teaching schedule and a chronic illness with one of our children, we made a decision at present to homeschool. Life, of course, comes with many decisions, including the one you all are facing today. For example, 2 years ago, my son Seth made a decision to join the cross-country and track teams at Wheaton North. Although a homeschooler, he was a true part of the team from day one, never once feeling excluded, and developed a deep passion for running. Just recently, Seth finished 5th overall in the DuPage human race. I was proud of him, not just because he ran well, but because he chose to use his running talent for the good of others. That's something you should be proud of too, for he would likely never have done it if it were not for the Wheaton North track and cross-country teams. After renting for a period of years, a year ago we decided to buy a house. 6 years of doctoral work, both of us with modest incomes and education funds were low. Yet because of Seth's commitment to running with the teams at Wheaton North, we chose not to buy a larger, nicer house in a cheaper area, but a 1,200 square foot fixer-upper within District 200. We chose to stay in Wheaton because of this community's special commitment to be inclusive of homeschool kids. Most recently, we had to break the news to Seth that he had to choose between the sport and teams he had fallen in love with at Wheaton North and the homeschooling community he had fallen in love with, the Greenhouse Co-School. Even if we figured out how he could take 5 classes at Wheaton North, even one homeschool class at the Greenhouse would disqualify him from running at Wheaton North. We then considered sending our money outside of Wheaton for homeschool support from a place not called a co-school. However, we are deeply committed to the Wheaton community and moreover knew of no other homeschooling organization that helps lower income families like ourselves. We then considered briefly whether Seth could run on a team at a private school as a homeschooler. However, these opportunities are extremely expensive. Every decision seemed to be a lose-lose situation. I share these decisions with you in hopes that it will help you in your own decision. Please revisit Policy 7.40. Please support local Wheaton community organizations, give consideration to lower income families who homeschool and want extracurriculars for their kids, and uphold the inclusivity that has made Wheaton such a great community. These are kids you should be proud of and proud to include. Can we work together as a community to make this a win-win situation for all of us, especially for these kids who deserve no less? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rusty. Next speaker is Harold Lawrence.
Yes, good evening. My name is Harold Lawrence, and yes, I'm a District 200 resident. I'd like to make a few comments on tonight's agenda. Number one, staff laptop lease. Why are the dollar amounts omitted from the agenda? It would be nice for the public to know how much money is going to be spent on the laptops and compare it to the lease that just ended. I also have the same question for the leases on the Dell Chromebooks and docking stations. No dollar amounts listed on the agenda. So I asked both my high schoolers how much time they spend on Chromebooks at Wheaton North High Schools, and their answers stunned me. One told me they spend as much as 4 or 5 times per month, and to as little as 1 or 2 times per month, depending on the class. My other daughter told me that she uses computers about every other day in 2 classes, and the other classes 1 or 2 times per month. So that made me wonder, can your IT department run some kind of utilization report showing the amount of time students and teaching staff uses laptops, Chromebooks that are logged into the school network on a school day and for the entire year? It would be interesting to see it by school, and especially at the high school level. Next, the WWEA contract. I applaud the summary sheet being attached to tonight's agenda. Under highlights, it would have been nice to include the length of workday that was clarified during the meeting times for teachers within and outside the workday. Next thing, the yearly salary increases has a generous floor, and that's probably to make up for the elimination of the step movements. On the lane structure, the BA24 lane was eliminated, which looks like a cost savings. However, it looks like lane BA24 was added to the master's lane, which is now $7,000, which gives you a $7,000 bump. If that's not enough, another form of compensation was added, and it's called micro-credentials. If a teacher takes 1 or 2 courses, or stacks as they call, they are given either a $500 or $1,000 bonus, which is added to their salary forever. After many discussions on student activity and sports fees over the last few months and costs associated with them, the board is going to approve a stipend increase of 2%. The highest stipend is only going to make the revenue cost gap much larger. As with many taxpayers and parents, I don't see this contract as a fair contract or a win. It's going to cost the district between $3.5 and $4.5 million per year over the next 4 years. These increases will only increase a ballooning deficit staring at us in the near future. How does the board and administration plan on paying for this generous teacher's contract, the lease certificates on a new Jefferson, deferred maintenance, capital improvements, secured entries, and Sherman Thurges? The district's revenue is pretty well fixed with the amount of state and federal funding and the amount of property taxes collected. I'm almost finished. There are only a couple ways of this upcoming, there are only a couple ways of this upcoming financial abyss. Drastically reducing staff and or doing a multi-million-dollar backdoor referendum without taxpayers' approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Next speaker I have is Mr. Bryce Evan.
Hello, my name is Bryce Haben, and I have been homeschooled for 4 years about now, and before that I've gone to multiple private schools. Next year, though, I've decided to take 3 classes at Monroe Middle School. Those classes are social studies, art, and choir. I had also planned to take 2 extracurricular activities, show choir and art club, but if the change to policy 7.40 remains in effect, I and other homeschoolers will be excluded from clubs, sports teams, musicals, etc. When I told some of my friends at Monroe Middle School that I would not be able to join the clubs that they had wanted me to join because of this new policy change, they were shocked. So I politely asked the board to let my voice be heard in the reconsidering of policy 7.40. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haben. Next speaker is Ms. Gretchen Paul.
Way to cut it short, right?
Good evening. My name is Gretchen Hall and I live in Wheaton. My husband and I with our 4 children. My children attend Longfellow School. At the end of my son's 3rd grade year, I decided to homeschool him for a few years. My other children stayed at Longfellow. The reasons I decided to homeschool him are not relevant to this particular issue, this issue 7.40, but I knew that it would only be for a couple years and that he would eventually be going back into the public school system. Therefore, it was important to me for him to stay connected academically and socially to the school. We covered all the core subjects in his home education, plus a few electives here and there as I was able. But we relied very heavily on the school during his 5th grade year, this current year, for participation in band, art, and music classes, as well as just his relationships with teachers, the principal. They know his face. He walks in the door and they say hello, and that has been very, very important to him.
Next year, he will attend Franklin Middle School. We live right across the street from Franklin. And I plan to supplement a few subjects with him at home, so kind of the reverse. Most of the day at Franklin, some of the day at home. We are one of many families, many more than even are here this evening, that have tremendously benefited from allowing homeschool children to participate in co-curricular classes. As parents and citizens who care deeply about this issue, I urge you to reverse your decision on students attending less than 5 classes and specifically prohibiting homeschool students to take part in public school clubs, classes, and sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Next speaker I have signed up is Claire Miller.
Hello, my name is Claire Miller. I am 12 years old. I went to Emerson Elementary School. In 6th grade, we started homeschooling and we are continuing in 7th grade. I am currently enrolled in band at Monroe Middle School. Next year, I am hoping to join in volleyball, track, and media club. We homeschool because we want to have a choice in what, how, and where we live. We want to travel more. Why just read about Washington, D.C.? Why not go? This year has been great because we have been able to use District 200 and many other resources to learn. I love being able to see my friends and participate in extracurricular activities while homeschooling. All students should be able to participate in sports because they help the student get better grades in school. Students who know how to work together despite differences help to strengthen the community. If you can be an example of cooperation and teamwork, you are more likely to teach the students, public or homeschooled, the same. I leave you with this. Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Helen Keller. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. The next speaker I have is Reed Schuhart.
Hello. Hello, my name is Reed Schuhart. This is my 3rd time appearing before you. Thank you for your patience and tolerance. And thank you for your work, Dr. Schuler and the board. It's always been, in our 11 years of living in Wheaton, in District 200, always been pleasant, positive, and mutually beneficial interactions we've always had. So it's always funny when you ask us to be civil and polite at these meetings. I just want to say I appreciate you to lead by example. So I've done some very rough and very conservative calculations. By my conservative calculations, I think there's about 300 families in District 200 to homeschool. Given the average tax base, that means that the District 200 is getting roughly, conservatively, about $1.7 million a year in tax revenue for the schools specifically. And I just want to urge you to consider, while that doesn't sound like a lot, it's only about 1% of your annual budget, that's enough to pay for all of your salaries in this room. And so I think it's worth at least putting on the table that we really deserve a fair hearing for this particular issue. You're getting something that's worth a lot, and you're getting it almost for nothing. If we take our tax dollars elsewhere, you're going to have people come here to put their kids in your schools, and you're going to get that same something, but for something, right? So to lose the homeschoolers in this area is not going to be beneficial for you. To keep them is actually in your best interest in a purely economic point of view. And what we're asking for, I think, is very small and very modest and very reasonable. So please do reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schuhart. Next speaker I have is Mr. Tom Spacek.
My name is Tom Spacek, and it has been my privilege to live and work in Wheaton since 1996. I know that makes me a newcomer in some instances, but it has been a pleasure to be here. And I too want to thank you not only for your service, but for your patients hearing us say the same thing over and over again. We know that it's a recurring theme tonight that we would petition you asking that, just as when the old policy was instituted and the voices of many were involved in that, the voices of administrators, teachers, the board, as well as the cross-section of the community, we would love to see that happen again in whatever changes may be necessary to the policy. We still don't know exactly what precipitated the need for a change, but we would love to have a chance to weigh in and be heard as we were initially. And that's the sum total of our push.
Thank you, Mr. Spacek. The next speaker I have is Mr. David, is it Sommer?
That's right. Sommer, thank you. Good evening. My name is Dave Sommer. I'm a resident of Wheaton, and I've lived in Wheaton as a permanent resident for 19 years. Been in and around Wheaton for 31 years as I attended Wheaton College. My wife, Julie, was born and raised in Wheaton. I would like to start, like many others, by thanking you all for your service on the board. We appreciate the sacrifice of time that you make and the dedication you've shown to making our schools the best they can be. So thank you. I love Wheaton. I love the people of Wheaton. It's a strong community and an incredible place to raise kids. One of the biggest things I love about Wheaton is its excellent school system. It's not perfect, but then again, no school system is. We can all be proud of not only the quality of the diversity of educational choices we have in Wheaton. For example, 4 of my children have graduated from Wheaton North High School, and I have a freshman there now. We have loved our experience at Wheaton North. Our family has also taken advantage of private and homeschool options at different times and in different seasons of life for various reasons. Just a few months ago, I was bragging to a friend about how open and inclusive District 200 was by allowing all Wheaton community students to participate in school activities. My children have greatly benefited from the inclusive policy in the last 18 years. That was before I found out about the change to the private school policy, something I learned about after it had already happened. I am aware that the recent private school policy change happened very quickly and with very little public input. I believe that all parties present have good intentions and that the full impact of this new policy on the community was not fully appreciated. I would like to humbly ask that this issue be put back on the table for the June agenda. While I believe it would be favorable to revert back to the more inclusive policy, at the very least, I would like to ask that a small committee be formed for further dialogue. I am positive that the right policy for this day and age can be worked out between the board, the administration, and the parents of the community. Thank you for all you do and for listening to me tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sommer. The next speaker I have is Daniel Myers.
How you doing? Thank you for your time. I just want to reiterate what somebody already said today, which is that IHSA is not authoritative here. They have no legal authority to set policy. You all do, for good reason. It's political accountability. But to the extent that you want to look to IHSA for guidance, as we've all noted, they expressly allow for the inclusion of homeschoolers. So the question is really how to implement that. How should it be done? And I submit that that was done almost 2 decades ago when the policy was written by administrators, board, principals, and parents. So we should stick with that policy. To the extent that something needs to get reworked or reviewed, there's parents here that stand ready to work with you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Next speaker is Laura Moore.
It's always been my dream to talk to you guys. I went through probably 48 different versions of what I'd like to say, and much of it was very similar to what you've already heard. I'd like you to understand that when you change a policy this way, without input from people who are affected by the policy, it's not just words on a page, it's lives, all of our kids' lives and our families' lives. And it's a community that we grow up in and we serve in our relationships with neighbors. I have 4 daughters from age 20 down to age 9. And my current student, I have a sophomore full-time at Wheaton North. She enjoyed homeschooling until the 8th grade. And during the course of that time, she was able to exercise her talent for running at the Franklin Middle School, where she really enjoyed the time that she spent on the team. She enjoyed her coaches. And those relationships that she formed on that team are the basis for her being able to walk in the doors at Wheaton North, a big school, a lot bigger than my house, for her to be able to play varsity tennis and participate in a fishing club. So I don't think that she would have wanted to enter into that school setting, having not had exposure to people that she met in her junior high years. My other children have also participated in things like choir, musical type things, and this fostered a love of music that goes on into the college years. And so it really, I just would like you to think about people that are affected by this and what the real lives are of the families and the children, and think about what the district misses out on by not having these kids in your programs, because I guarantee you that these kids that you have are quality kids that are not behavioral problems, they're encouragement to other kids on their team, they're leaders. And I just would like you to consider this and maybe entertain the thought of having input from the community in a real way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. My next speaker is Matthew, is it Dominguez?
Dominguez, yeah. Hi, I'm Matthew Dominguez. I'm born and raised around here in Warrenville and Wheaton. I have been teaching at Wheaton Academy for 18 years, and I'm a philosophy and literature teacher. And my kids are growing up in this community. And just as an educator, one of the things I wanted to point out that as I'm stepping into all of this is you guys know that education is not just in the classroom. And so how we navigate this process is teaching the students how to navigate stuff like this. So I think that might be something to put out here is what are you guys going to model for the students? And you've heard it, they're having to deal with it. And so I think that's just something to consider. Is how can we model excellence? How can we model inclusivity? How can we model justice for all of the kids in need? And then I just want to call to heart. I think that's part of it, is we have the stats. There's so many things going on, but call to the heart issue. Were you affected by being able to participate in activities such as these? And how can we allow students to be able to be impacted maybe for the rest of their lives? And then I think the last word I want to say is, as I love Wheaton, I love being here, and I love talking about it. I think that's another chance too, is let's strive for justice. Let's strive, just like I would do with my own kids, let's be kind. I mean, they were just playing today, and I encourage them to include someone with what they were playing with. They're 9 and 4. And I think also just creating opportunity. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. And my last speaker is Mr. Tom Masson.
My Irish relatives would be offended by that pronunciation. It's McAdam. Thank you, Jim.
I'm just going with the handwriting.
Well, my printing isn't as good as my kids' cursive, I'm afraid. Knowing I only have 3 minutes, as a former litigator, I love to speak extemporaneously, but I'm just going to read my comments to the record and then hand all these to Chris, so she can maybe hand them to the board. Use the microphone, please. Yeah, I will. We're grateful for District 200's past willingness to apply the IHSA guidelines, allowing homeschool students, particularly those taking limited courses in public schools, to participate in athletics and extracurriculars in our community schools. Over the years, our public schools have carefully confirmed compliance with all IHSA eligibility requirements to allow for this rightful participation by children from tax-paying families in our community who have chosen to exercise their fundamental right to direct their education. Recently, an issue has arisen about whether the taking of limited classes through a private school somehow contradicts the fact that certain students are following an approved homeschool plan. Instead, the school administration initially explained that dual enrollment in a public and private school is somehow a violation. However, that standard exists nowhere in the IHSA guidelines. In fact, a homeschool is considered a private school in Illinois, and IHSA rules expressly permit participation by homeschool students who attend a local public high school. Attendance, not enrollment, is the test. IHSA bylaws even affirm that a student must attend a member school and may only represent the school they attend. So what does attend mean? In the IHSA guidelines, their definition of attend says, attend shall mean the student is enrolled at the member school and taking at or under arrangements approved by the member school a minimum of 25 credit hours, for which credit will be received toward the high school diploma. So based on the IHSA's definition and bylaws defining attendance, homeschool students are eligible to participate in athletics in the Wheaton schools, or at least they were, until this policy change. So as further support, the IHSA guidelines define that homeschool students can participate, and it even goes back to the term attendance. It defines that homeschool students may participate if they attend, meaning, as I defined it, 25 hours or more at the school or in a program approved by the school. So based on this, and the IHSA rules, a homeschooled student enrolled in the Wheaton schools and meeting the definition of one who attends the school is clearly eligible under 3.010, even if they may take one or more courses towards their homeschool diploma from a private school. So for all these reasons, it is clear that the district's prior policy 7.40, under which the schools have been operating, has in fact been compliant with the IHSA guidelines and allowing the verifiably homeschooled students to participate in extracurriculars. It is a great disappointment that this board has chosen, and this administration has chosen, to take this path. It's especially a disappointment to me that this board, I think, did not get full and fair consideration, and I feel like in a way you were done a disservice by not having an opportunity to really hear about what I've just shared. Because of that, and the inability to reason and consider the policies of your predecessors who involved the community, the schools, the administration, and the prior board, instead, that policy, which was intentionally inclusive, has been overturned. And now this board has enacted a policy that, as written, does the opposite, favoring exclusion of students and having a discriminatory effect on citizens for their exercise of their constitutional right to guide the education of their children. So, for all those reasons, and those you heard earlier, we appreciate your willingness to reconsider. We're open to more dialogue, and I hope that my other three children will have the benefit of my first two days.
Thank you, Mr. McAdam. That concludes the public comment section on agenda items. We will now move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Broman. A couple of things that I wanted to share with the board this evening under my report. Number one, I just want to start with a recognition and a thank you of our district teachers. This week yesterday was Teacher Appreciation Day. I think the board and a couple of your chance to chat opportunities this year, certainly as you've engaged with students across the district. I think one of the messages you've heard routinely is how much they appreciate the teachers that they're working with, learning from, that are guiding their activities every day. And so again, on the post-Teacher Appreciation Day, I wanted to thank them. I think today is in fact Nurses Appreciation Day, so I was in a school earlier and had an opportunity to thank in person a couple of school nurses as well. So again, if you've got a teacher, nurse in your life or somebody that you're close to, take that opportunity. A couple of things in your green folders in the very back. One is a number of board members had the opportunity to attend the Wheaton Warrenville PTA Council Scholarship Breakfast that took place on April the 25th. But I thought those of you that perhaps didn't have an opportunity would really enjoy reading the booklet on the students that were recognized that came from across the district. Certainly a nice rundown of their accomplishments in District 200 and where in fact they're heading. So I wanted to provide that for you. Also wanted to share, because you may have seen some of this information certainly shared either in the media or out on social media today. U.S. News and World Report annually produces rankings of high schools across the country. Wheaton North, Wheaton, Warrenville South were in fact in that ranking again in the state of Illinois. Wheaton North ranked the 34th best high school in Illinois. Wheaton Warrenville South, the 21st best high school in the state of Illinois. So that's based on a combination of metrics that include test scores, percentage of kids that are accessing advanced coursework or advanced AP coursework, proficiency, pass rate within those advanced placement classes, and then the college readiness index that's used along with graduation rates and a few other kind of comprehensive metrics. But we have had, I think even at the board, there was some conversation over the last couple of years about Wheaton Warrenville South that had kind of dropped down in that ranking and has since come back in and actually I think jumped up 13 spots in that ranking this year. So.
How many schools are in that? How many high schools in the state of Illinois?
That's a great question. I don't know right off the top of my head. I know that there, I know how many school districts there are in the state of Illinois, about 700 school districts, but they don't all have high schools, so it's pretty significant.
So it's probably over 1,000.
I would suspect that's correct.
Thank you.
Also, just wanted to share, Chris had an opportunity to join me a little bit earlier today over at Madison Elementary School. A group of first grade students at Madison were engaged in a problem-based learning experience where really the focus through a project that actually carried through a good chunk of the year was really on kind of student interaction with the environment and how, in fact, they can interact, especially with animals within the environment, to make sure that we're able to coexist and to help that navigate. But so the project itself was very, very cool, but the way that students utilize some of the new technology and opportunity in the school through the green screen and a number of other programs to express what they had learned through that, really a cool experience. And to go into a first grade classroom and have first graders confidently be able to answer questions, share what they learned, how they learned it, the way that they went about that just was a very, very rewarding experience. And that came right on the heels of having been able to attend a similar experience at Lowell last week, and then Whittier shortly before that engaged in kind of a similar problem-based learning type experience. So that's very cool. And then just two more things very quickly. I had an opportunity this morning to attend with Stephanie Farley, who's the principal of Jefferson Early Learning Center, and some representatives from Metropolitan Family Services. We went over to the DuPage Community Foundation. They are the funding source behind the Early Childhood Collaborative that has functioned within our community. There are a number of other communities across DuPage County that have something similar, with a goal really of creating opportunities and conditions for all students to come to school ready to learn in kindergarten. And so the foundation is reviewing kind of the renewal of that grant application and asked us to go spend some time with them today to share some of the results from the Early Learning Collaborative early. And I wanted to mention that to the board because one of the things that was important to the DuPage Foundation was to know and understand our own board's commitment to early childhood education. And so I was certainly able to share the work that you've done, not only from a facilities perspective, but also the work that you've done in and really making sure that we have vibrant early learning opportunities. And so, again, I just wanted to mention that I very much appreciated seeing some of the data that Julie and her team have put together and really looking at some of those readiness indicators and how they've shifted, especially with some of the full-day kindergarten opportunities and the students accessing that over the last couple of years. So thank you for that. And then finally, in your packet, Dr. Rammer, I think, provided for the board just a little two-page rundown of graduation. Graduation is coming up on the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, and so there's just some quick reminders. This year, Wheaton North High School has the 10 o'clock commencement. Warrenville South is at 3 o'clock. So there's a map, just a reminder of all of the things that you need to bring with you, and this is just my final reminder that now is the time to get that graduation robe out of the closet and hang it up and get all the wrinkles out of it. Make sure you have your hood and all of the pieces that you need, and if by chance you don't, please let us know that ASAP so that we can get them prior to graduation. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Any questions or comments from board members? Hearing none, we'll move on. We will move on to the consent agenda. Please bear with me. I know you offered it. No, I'll take it. 1. Acceptance of gifts from Sandburg Elementary School PTA. 2. Acceptance of gift from Washington Elementary School PTA. 3. Acceptance of gifts from the Student Excellence Foundation. 4. Approved revised policy 2.260 uniform grievance. 5. Approved revised policy 4.40 incurring debt. 6. Approved revised policy 5.20 workplace harassment. 7. Approval to post high school applications and writing textbook for public review and comment. 8. Approval to post high school college literacy skills textbook for public review and comment. 9. Approval of high school, middle school, and elementary school student handbooks for the 2018-19 school year. 10. Approval of the district representative to the DuPage Area Occupational Education System. Board of Director for the 2018-19 school year. 11. Approval of Chartwell's food service management contract renewal. 12. Approval of the First Amendment to the Community Unit School District 200 403 B closed plan. 13. Approval of resolution appointing treasurer and approving the treasurer's bond. 14. Approval of treasurer's bond coverage. 15. Approval of staff laptop lease. 16. Approval of leases for Dell Chromebooks and docking stations. 17. Approval to set the last student attendance day for 2017-18. 18. Adoption of Board of Education meeting calendar for 2018-19. 19. Approval of bills payable and payroll. 20. Approval of minutes, April 11, 2018, open and closed. April 25, 2018, Committee of the Whole, open and closed. And approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to December 2016 as allowable by law. 21. Approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any board items board members want to remove from the consent agenda?
I'd like number 9 moved to action.
Number 9, approval of high school, middle school, and elementary school student handbooks for the 2018-19 school year shall be moved to action items. And number 3. That'll become action item number 3. Any other action consent items to be moved? Are there any questions or comments? First of all, Dr. Schuler.
Just a couple of things very quickly. I just want to make note, I think a little bit earlier I saw Bob Hupp in and around. I don't know if Bob is still here. Okay, Bob is from the Student Excellence Foundation. So you approved 3 very generous donations today, one from the Sandburg Elementary PTA, one from the Washington Elementary PTA, but you also approved a gift from the Student Excellence Foundation for $136,000. So that represented a number of the donations that were associated with the Business Incubator program, as well as some of the district-wide efforts I just mentioned earlier about the green screens. That was one of their major projects. So, is Jennifer? Oh, hey.
I don't think Bob's here.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you.
We're glad to partner with you.
Absolutely. So thank you to the Student Excellence Foundation certainly for that. There were a couple of questions that came up. Just one quick clarification on the Board of Education meeting calendar. The first calendar that we posted had a January chat with the board that we realized fell on a long weekend. We followed kind of what has been the traditional calendar for that chat with the board, but thank you, Mrs. Crabtree, for noting that. So we pushed that back a week in the calendar that's now posted with that agenda item. And I think that's all that I have.
Are there any questions or comments for Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, just a quick question on the Chromebook, please. So we're replacing 1,300 of those? 1,300. How many total do we have?
Chromebooks? Roughly 6,000. 6,100.
So when we get donations from the Student Excellence Foundation or PTAs, and those have to be replaced, they become part of our cost.
Yeah, correct. Yes, these 1,300 are actually replacing ones that were probably 90% supplied by Title I funds. They were the first set, and it's just the unit itself is still working, but the Chrome management will no longer allow us from a management council to control or manage those devices, so they're being refreshed kind of as a need, because as of November 2018 we would lose control of those to be able to manage them while kids are on them.
So what do we do with the 1,300 that we're replacing?
Those, it's not working. Those will be used as part of our universal access. We took the old staff laptops, converted them to Chrome. Once we get the 1,300 in the summer, we will which ones are available for donation and work with elementaries and high schools on families that need devices at home. Because these units can be controlled by an individual, they just can't be managed anymore.
With universal access, we started focusing on the high school, middle school area in terms of looking at making sure that students have access to the technology they need outside of the school day to complete the work that they've started. So this will allow us to bring that effort down into the elementary schools, which is something that they've very much been asking for.
Jim? In that same regard then, Lisa, Steve, would you say, we have 13,000 students now and we have, I don't know how many pieces of equipment. Is the utilization, could we use more? Is it adequate? Or are we not using them appropriately?
It's a great question. So we look at that two ways. Certainly, as we shared with the board earlier this year, we asked some questions around universal access associated with our professional learning community survey this year, and staff feedback certainly suggested that there are some pockets where staff do not have access to equipment and devices as much as they would like to. We do also have the ability, and we do, Rod through his department, the beauty of a Chromebook is you can absolutely monitor every single Chromebook and how long it has been turned on and in use for any given day. And so we do in fact do that. We look at that by building, we look at that across buildings to see if there are devices that are underutilized and devices that are utilized kind of beyond what we would kind of deem to be capacity. So. And Jim, I think the answer to that question is we use both of those pieces of information to evaluate that. Save the refresh that you saw here, we didn't recommend a large-scale purchase this year because I think we recognize that there still is a call for a little bit more. We saw some pockets where there are some devices underutilized and are working on how we can even that out.
In that same regard, we use professional learning communities where our staff to, I assume, adapt more and more technology in our classroom. And I think that's a motivating factor. And I think even in the contract that we're going to be looking at tonight, there's different certifications. And I think a lot of those are directed toward achieving more computer technology skills. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that our initiative has been around that fit learning environment. So acronym, I realize the Future of Instruction and Technology. Several years ago, when the board first entertained the notion of a one-to-one environment, I think the board and the district wisely at the time took a step back and said, let's focus on what it is that we want students to be able to do, what's the learning, and then how does technology fit into that? There are learning situations that do not involve technology. There are learning situations that may involve a piece of technology, but several students or adults collaborating around that piece of technology, and so that's where the focus has been. So to your question, I guess I would not say that the some of the micro-credentials that we'll talk about a bit under the contract are necessarily just related to the use of technology, but they are certainly related to how do we effectively address the learning needs and opportunities of kids through the use of technology along with other resources. Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Hearing none. I ask for a motion and a second. Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Paulson.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes. The first part of the consent agenda is approved. We do have the consent agenda 2, which contains one item, approval of the resolution designating depositories. Does any board member want this moved to an action item? If not, Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, no additional information. We just have separated this out as a separate consent agenda because I think we will have one board member that needs to abstain from this vote. That's it.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Schuler? Hearing none, I ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda 2 as presented. Moved by Mr. Hanlon.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
As a board member of Wheaton Bank and Trust, Wintrust, I abstain.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes. Consent agenda item number 2, approval of the resolution designating depositories is passed. Now we move to action items. And I must read the following. The next item for consideration is adoption of a resolution providing for the issue of the district's general obligation refunding bonds, and that the Board of Education will consider the adoption of a resolution providing for the issue of said bonds and the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest thereon. Ms. Crabtree?
Resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $25 million general obligation refunding school bonds, Series 2018, Community Unit School District 200, number 200, DuPage County, Illinois, and for the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest on said bonds.
We're going to follow a little different procedure for this particular action item. I ask for a motion and a second to adopt said resolution as presented and read by title by Mrs. Crabtree.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Paulson.
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Gambiani. Dr. Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Broman. This item, we've spent quite a bit of time at Finance Committee, and so just stepping back really quickly, one piece of introduction, then I'll turn it over to Bob Lewis from PMA. The board started several years ago a 4-phase debt restructure or refunding that was about an opportunity to do 2 things. One, to refund some bonds that were originally issued at a higher interest rate, and so we're able to refund those to a lower interest rate and save the community money, and also address at the same time what was a debt service payment schedule that had kind of a bit of a ski slope to it and was going to really start to create some problems for the community. And so the board passed at the time kind of a 4-phase plan to restructure that debt. We've executed 2 of those phases. We're ready this year to execute phase 3. So I'm going to hand it over to Bob Lewis, who's going to just walk the board through a couple of slides summarizing phase 3, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. Bob?
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. The first slide in the presentation is begins the market update. It's just a reminder, when it comes to the municipal bond market, there's a variety of different factors that impact interest rates. We tend to, in the public, oftentimes just focus on Federal Reserve policy, thinking that is the main and only variable that impacts interest rates, and that is not true, especially for medium to long-term rates. It does have an impact on it, but a variety of other factors have an impact as well, especially municipal bond supply and demand. We're in a period of low supply, which has helped prevent rates from going up as much as the Treasury rates have gone up so far this year. And the other thing that's been a major change in the market lately is the change in federal income tax law has had effects on the market. It's eliminated the ability to do certain types of refundings. It also has lowered marginal tax rates, and those lower marginal tax rates make municipal bonds less valuable to certain types of investors, namely corporations, banks, or casualty insurance companies. They have a much lower tax rate than they did last year, and if you have a lower tax rate, it doesn't benefit you as much to hold a tax-exempt bond. So that has put, all other things being equal, that would put some upward pressure on interest rates this year for municipal bonds, especially relative to Treasury rates. But we have, because of this change in the refunding rule, we have a dramatically lower supply. Supply is down at least 30% so far this year, which for you, when you're going to sell a bond issue, is a good factor in the market. The next slide shows you an index of interest rates. It's called the MMD or AAA, this is market basket of AAA rated bonds from across the country. It's the higher, larger issuer type AAA states, like Georgia, for instance. And this is used in our industry not to necessarily indicate where a specific issuer will borrow, but to monitor trends in the market. So if you look, for instance, at the blue line, this data goes back to 2008, the onset of the Great Recession. You can see how the blue line plummeted and stayed relatively constant for 7 years, because that was the 1-year rate. It's pretty well tied to what Federal Reserve policy is. So it stayed pretty constant for about 7 years. But you notice while Federal Reserve policy was constant for a 7-year period of time, all the rates above it, the 5, the 10, the 15, and 20, were moving up and down throughout those years, and that's because those portions of the yield curve are impacted by all those other factors I talked about in the other page, not just Federal Reserve policy. Now we have seen upward movement in rates since the Fed started raising the Fed funds rate in late 15, but most of that impact has been seen on the 1 and the 5-year rate. Obviously, there's been some impact on the 10 to 15 and 20, but much of last year, the 10 to 15 and 20 fluctuated in a narrow band. We have seen an increase this year, and that's because the Treasury rate has increased. It was well below 2.5%, the 10-year Treasury, and it's now, it came back above 3% again today. And munis just can't get too far aligned with the Treasury rate. We take the ratio of munis to Treasury, so that ratio is fairly low, which tells you munis are holding their own relative to the Treasury market, and that's primarily due to the low supply. Supply was normal, you probably see even higher interest rates right here. So that's an overview of the market. And thankfully, in the restructuring plan, we've always been fairly conservative and took current market at the time and added additional yield. It depended on which phase it was, but it was usually anywhere between 50 to 75 basis points we were adding to that, which means we were putting in some comfort in the event that rates begin to rise. So this gray area here represents the current debt service structure of the district. Debt service, as a reminder, is your principal and your interest payments. And this is graphed according to levy year. Levy year 16, for instance, were the taxes paid in calendar year 17. So if you look, we begin with the taxes paid last year. Levy year 17 will be the taxes that are being paid this summer. And so just a minor increase from 16 to 17, and from 17 to 18 there's another minor increase, but then you can see it goes up dramatically before it falls off and then hits a peak of above $30 million in levy year 22, and it's those peaks that the restructuring plan is set to address. There were earlier peaks in 17 and 18, those years would have been higher, except those were taken care of in phases 1 and 2. And also with the application of the Hubble funds. If you remember, you received some funds from the sale of Hubble. You use that to pay down debt. And that was used to bring down debt in those earlier years as well. So now we're going to look at the next couple phases. A little bit more detail on this next slide. The objective, again, is to level off the payment at approximately $21 million per year and not allow it to reach that peak of $31.5 million. First two phases are complete. Phase 3 is upon us, and that has to do with the timing of the call dates. We're all familiar with refinancing our home mortgage. Many of us have probably done it several times over our lives. And with a home mortgage, those can be paid off and refinanced any time. You don't have to wait a period of time, which is called the call date. Municipal bonds are sold with call protection to your investors, so they know when they buy the bonds, they can get that return for a period of time. That's typically 8 to 10 years after issuance. In the case of these last two financings, the 2008 bonds are called on October 1st of 18, so it's 10 years later. And the interest rate on those bonds is just a touch below 5%, which is still considerably above the market rate at this time. With the IRS rules on refunding, you can close on a financing on a tax-exempt basis to refinance outstanding bonds within 90 days of the call date, which means that we can close on this refinancing in early July. So if you look at later on, when we get to the timeline, you'll see that the scheduled closing date is in early July. That gets you in that 90-day window, which gets the bond sold, locks in the rate, gets rid of the market risk on phase 3. Phase 4, it would occur next year, and that just, again, goes to the timing of the call date. The call date is October 1st of 2019, and that refunds the 2009 bonds. The rate on those is about 4.19%. There's about $42 million that's callable. Phase 3, the amount that's callable is about $24 million. Now, the Finance Committee and PMH, Financial Advisor, has been already looking at Phase 4, looking at some options to help manage that risk. We're not prepared to present those options at this time. We're still going to explore them. But they're really the decision on Phase 4 and Phase 3 are separate, so you can make this decision on Phase 3, and hopefully in the near future we provide some more information on Phase 4. The next slide just provides some additional numerical detail on the principal that's outstanding by series. So this says this only reflects the principal, it does not reflect the interest payments. And the principal that's in a box is callable principal. So that's the payments that can be refinanced to a lower interest rate. And you can see several series that are paying off here in this upcoming fiscal year. Your 09A bonds will be going away, your 15 bonds will be going away, and you only have one payment remaining on 2009B bonds. So the number of series that you have outstanding are going down, and you can see you only have a few years left on your outstanding bonds. And even though we will be extending the payment to eliminate that spike, the final payment's only being extended by 2 years. So it's not like you are pushing it way out the curve. So let's go into some detail here on phase 3. What we've shown you here graphically is a combined graph of phases 3 and 4, because we want to remind you of what the vision was for the restructuring plan. So in the background, you see the gray area that represents your current debt service. The blue bars represent your referendum-approved debt service, and the orange bars represent non-referendum debt service. The bars that have the slash lines, that's historical information. You cannot change that. You've either levied for it and collected, or you're in the process of collecting it, which is the case of 17. So after the restructuring, levy year 18 will be at 21 million, and then the other years are slightly below 21 million. And you can see that instead of the bonds being paid off in levy year 23, because it would have gone to 0 in levy year 24, you've added 2 more payments at the end of levy years 24 and 25 to get rid of that gray area above the orange peaks, if you will. And the advantage to that is, of course, that your taxpayers will not see this dramatic increases on the debt portion of their bill in those years. And it's turning your debt structure into a level overall payment, if not a declining payment, which is what your taxpayers are used to with their debt. Their debt, their home mortgage, their car payments, it doesn't creep up and go up over time. It's leveled off, which means as new property comes into the district, everybody's share in the debt burden will start to decline in each successive year, because that new property will come in with a flat payment and absorb some of that debt burden. This next slide shows you the estimated savings at current market rates for phase 3. The first column that doesn't represent a date is the estimated debt service for the refunding bonds. You have one payment, if you recall on the prior slide, that is not callable. That's the payment due on October 1st of 18. That's for the unrefunded debt service. You take those two together, you get the net new debt service. And the second to last column there on the right is the old debt service. So when you compare those two columns, you can see the annual savings, and in this case, you have 2 years of dis savings, which is reflected by the extension of the debt by 2 years. So very little savings next year, about $97,000, because remember that year it wasn't going up that much. Then you really start shaving off, attacking those peaks, and removing 5.9 and 8.5 million, and extending some of those payments into 23 and 24. Now here you're seeing this according to fiscal years. Levy year is always 2 years before, so fiscal year 24 is equal to levy year 22. So if you're doing the conversion between the graph and the data you see on this slide. So the total savings is still a positive $225,000. That's total levy savings, so that's what will be levied and collected off the taxes based off the estimate. Your bonds won't be sold for another month if you approve this tonight and we follow the timeline. So you do retain market risk until they're sold. And then if you go to the other yellow line, it says net present value benefit. That's $1 million. So your present value savings is higher than your cash flow savings, which might be a bit of a head scratcher because you're typically used to present value being lower than the cash flow savings. But that is due to the fact that the savings are the debt service is being re-amortized. If in any sort of present value calculation, the earlier numbers in the calculation weigh more heavily in the formula than the later numbers. So your earlier numbers are big positive numbers, your two later numbers are two negative numbers. So when you take the present value, you actually get a number that's higher than the cash flow savings, which actually is, if you understand the concept of present value, makes sense. Simply present value is $1 today. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So when taxpayers are saving money in those earlier years, that's dearer to them than taxes that they have to pay a couple years later with the extension. This is just the detail that goes into the graph. I'm not going to really cover this here, but I wanted to provide it to you in the event you want to know what fed into the graph. We do show what phase 4 is here separately. We are showing at the bottom of the columns the estimated savings. So phase 4, remember, is calculated at current market plus 50 basis points. So there's a cushion built into that. Now you may have heard that the Fed is anticipating to do 2 more rate increases this year. And with that anticipation, markets don't wait for them to actually happen. Markets adjust with the new information. So the yield curves that you saw earlier have already factored in an additional 2 increases this year. So what would surprise the market would be additional increases or inflation that starts to get out of control, which is why we want to examine options for phase 4 to see if we can help manage that interest rate risk. Because inflation is a concern. We've seen it hit 2% of the GDP deflator, and there's always a concern about tariffs. If those actually go into effect, tariffs can lead to price increases because input costs increase, which eventually trickles down to the consumer. So we will continue to monitor that and how it factors into phase 4. But hopefully the additional 50 basis points that we've added to it is enough of a cushion to protect the savings that we're showing there. This next slide shows the potential timeline of events. We presented at the Finance Committee on the 16th, and actually we came back again late April too, didn't we? Yeah. Can't remember the exact date, but we met the Finance Committee twice to go over this analysis. Tonight the board has for its consideration the parameters resolution. As a reminder, what a parameters resolution is a document that sets forth, as it suggests, parameters that cannot be exceeded, like a maximum principal amount. We always take what the anticipated principal amount is, and then we round it up to the nearest million, just because you never want to get it too tight. And then we put in a maximum interest rate, that the action has to be taken within 6 months of passage. So this isn't a permanent thing. If something happens, it just doesn't go on forever. It would expire in 6 months. It's not anticipated to go out that far, but it does expire. And then it names delegates to approve the sale away from the board meeting so that we can time the sale to occur at an appropriate time, one that where there's not a lot of economic announcements, hopefully a day that's going to be stable in the market, as opposed to targeting a board meeting date, which is not usually a good strategy for setting your bond sale date. So those delegates that are named are the board president and one administrative official, which would either be Dr. Schuler or Mr. Farley. The administration is working on a credit rating presentation, and we're working along with them. We are going to Standard & Poor's again. They rate you AA. Moody's rates you AA3, which is a notch lower. So we go to the agency that has the higher rating, because obviously a higher rating gives you a lower interest rate. And then the anticipation is we get that rating in late May. We're going to push really hard to try to get an upgrade. The district since has been upgraded by S&P 2, maybe even 3 years ago now, I can't recall. So the rating, or the factors since that rating have been nothing but positive. The district has added somewhat to fund balance. It has adopted the fund balance policy. It's stuck to that policy. You're in the process of working through a capital plan, which is always good to have that in place. Your EAV has increased, so while you have not seen declines in property tax revenues, which is the concern in some cases with declining property values represent a loss of wealth to the area. And your EAV has increased the last 3 years, I believe, and is now at a point where it's only, I believe, 5% below its peak. And that's a huge credit factor for the standpoint that wealth has returned to the community. And probably one more year, you'll be back. If not at your peak, you'll be very close to it, if not exceeding it. So you have a lot of things that have been moving in your favor. So we're going to push really hard trying to get an upgrade, but nothing's guaranteed. Then the sale would be approximately June 12th. And at that time, you would receive bids. I anticipate, given the size of this issue, its length of maturity being relatively short, and the Wheaton name, the high credit rating, you'll get several bids in the market that day. And whoever has got the lowest true interest cost will be the firm that wins the bond sale. And then we'll report the sales results to Mr. Farley, and then he'll be able to share those with the board through an update. And then the bonds will close around July 9th. July 9th gets you within that 90-day window that's required by the IRS in order for the financing to be tax exempt. Last slide is a summary of the cost of issuance, where we tell you who the party is, give you a brief description of what that party is doing on your financing, provide the total there, and that total comes out to less than 0.4%, which is a lower percentage than what you normally see in your bond issues, and that's because as bond issues get larger, the percent comes down. The average comes down on those bond sales. It's just the way the meeting fees work, our fee works, the attorney's fees work as well. So that's the presentation. Any questions?
Just clarification, I may have misheard. The bonds that are subject to the fourth stage of our refinancing, their current interest rate is at 5.1%, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Just a couple comments. Mr. Gamby and I saved you about 20 pages of presentation. But it's, so we looked at a number of other, as mentioned by Mr. Lewis, we had 2 different meetings at the Finance Committee, both of which were looking at different alternatives on this. We gave thought of refinancing phase 4 right now, but it would have been a taxable event. But with rising rates and so on, we looked at that, and the authoritative reference implied that it was not a good decision at this point, although we're going to monitor it. Number one. Number two, what is the rate that we're looking at on these projections? I know that the bonds that we're calling are approximately 4.9%.
The rate would be, we're estimating around 2.84%.
So almost a 2% reduction, and that's why we see that $1 million. Was it $1 million present value savings?
Correct.
Over the cycle of these bonds. So, and this, again, is really nothing more than a step in the 4-part refinancing that we put on the board about 5 years ago, in 2015. So it is right in line with what we've accomplished, and we've looked at it very hard, and we think the Finance Committee, is more than willing to support this process at this time. So,
Yeah, just to echo Jim's comments, we did spend a lot of time on this, and the math works very well and accomplishes multiple things for the district. And at the end of the day, we're reducing the interest rate significantly, enjoying some net present value savings, and to your point, we're not moving that payment schedule out but 1 or 2 years, 2 years at this point in time. And again, we did look at multiple scenarios and trying to really determine whether doing both phase 3 and phase 4 concurrently made sense with regard to savings on the preparation, the legal fees and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it just made more sense to execute phase 3 at this point in time and then anticipate the phase 4 execution shortly thereafter.
Questions, comments from other board members?
First off, I appreciate you only going out 8 years, right, instead of 20. I think that was a good plan. 2 questions. First off, can you confirm that the Jefferson Early Childhood Lease Agreement is not part of any of these graphs? That's a separate bucket of money, so to speak. And then can you talk a little bit about any impact the state financial situation might be having on rates in the marketplace right now?
Sure. Yeah, the debt service you see here is debt service that's levied for separately on the operating funds. So any of your leases, whether it's a bus lease or computer lease, those are all paid from your operating funds. So they're not reflected in these charts. So including the lease for Jefferson, because you have to pay that out of your current resources. And then regarding the state, yeah, we still see a penalty in the market, the Illinois penalty, if you will, that is applied by investors who want to buy bonds because of the headline risk that the state of Illinois has, the concerns that trickle down to the various units of government, not just schools, but cities, everything. Even cities are having a little more difficulty now because they have more pension issues with their police and fire pensions. That's something you don't have to worry about directly, although pension issues are, of course, forefront of everybody's mind in our state. And the good news for you, though, is that penalty is muted on shorter financings. It gets larger the further you go out, it gets larger the lower your credit rating. So I anticipate that you will have a penalty, which we factored into here, but that penalty is probably in that area of the yield curve we're selling maybe 30 to 40 basis points over a similarly rated issue, let's say Wisconsin would have. But it's real money. I mean, and it's not just you, it's issuers all across the state. I can't remember what it was, the exact number was, but there's been estimates about the billions of dollars in additional interest costs that local issuers have had to pay because of the state's issues.
And this $1 million net present value savings isn't money that we can reallocate into other costs. It's just money that we don't have to ask the taxpayers for out of the debt service line. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no way for you to capture the savings for the operating funds.
Any other questions from board members? If not, ask Mrs. Hutchinson to call the roll.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Vroman?
Yes. Motion carried and said resolution adopted, approved, and signed the same in open meeting and directed the Secretary to record the same in the records of the Board of Education of Community Unit School District Number 200, DuPage County, Illinois. So I guess we'll be signing something. The next action item we have is approval of the WWEA contract. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. In front of the board this evening is a recommendation to approve a new collective bargaining agreement with the Wheaton Warrenville Education Association. We attached with the agenda item kind of a rundown of the highlights, the changes in that new agreement. And I'm just going to go through a couple of those, certainly with the board. One is to remind the board that this agreement would replace the existing agreement that expires June 30 of this year. We're coming off of a 3-year agreement with the Wheaton Warrenville Education Association. One of the highlights in that last agreement was that for the last 2 years, we've been working collaboratively with a committee that was designated through the last agreement to really look at what is the long-term structure for how it is that we should compensate our teachers. I think we all agree. It is to our mutual benefit to make sure that we retain a highly qualified staff in District 200 that we very much have. But we also wanted to make sure that as we move forward, that any compensation agreement balances both fiscal sustainability for the district and the community and our desire to compensate the things that we agree are important to us in terms of moving forward the goals of the school district. And so so I guess what I would say is that when we get into kind of the highlights of the negotiation, well, the actual negotiation around this agreement has really been going on since January. It's actually been going on for a couple of years as we've done some work behind this agreement. So a huge thank you to both of the bargaining teams. So just a couple of the highlights. Back in October, we met with the board in executive session to identify the bargaining team, set the parameters around the bargain, the financial parameters, language parameters, and then the board identified the HR policy committee to work in oversight throughout the bargaining process. And obviously, as we got to the end, we reviewed that with the full board. The bargaining began back in January 17th. There were 10 sessions. A tentative agreement was reached on April the 18th. That agreement was ratified by the Wheaton Warrenville Education Association on May 4th, and thus the reason it's in front of the board tonight. It is a 4-year collective bargaining agreement that will take us through the year 2022. A couple of the highlights in the agreement: it does extend the elementary workday by 15 minutes, the high school workday by 5 minutes to provide consistency across all levels, and a 7.5-hour day that accommodates professional learning community time for all of our educators, something that's very important. It does define, clarify some of the meeting times within and outside that workday, as well as removes some of the outdated language that went away as replaced No Child Left Behind. The compensation highlights, year 1 of the agreement, so that's the 18-19 school year, with the elimination of that previous salary schedule. There's a 2.5% increase called for in 18-19. Years 2, 3, and 4 of the agreement, that increase will be tied to cost of living, but with a floor of 2.5 and a ceiling of 3.5 within the agreement. We did retain the kind of what was the lane structure. So lane structure in the previous salary model was the opportunity for teachers to pursue education that in fact enhanced the work that they did in the classroom. And so we did retain those opportunities. One of the existing lanes, the BA24 lane, was pulled back. And so there is a bachelor's degree, bachelor's 15, and then right to a master's degree lane. And then there are, in fact, 4 lanes going beyond the master's degree with specific amounts called for. So as a teacher moves from a bachelor's to bachelor's 15, there's a flat $2,500 increase. As they move into the master's lane, there's a flat $7,000 increase. And then as they move across the master's lanes, there's a flat $3,500 increase. There was some comment earlier about micro-credential, and so let me just kind of quickly explain that concept. I think there was an interest, certainly from the board, from the salary study group, that we want to make sure that we provide an opportunity to compensate teachers for learning and addressing skills that are very much important collectively to the organization. That's what a micro-credential is. A micro-credential is a series of professional learning modules tied together. They have embedded in the micro-credential an application element. So as a teacher's working through a micro-credential, there is a requirement that there be an application of that learning experience to their classroom. And then in fact, their evidence of completion of that micro-credential is actually evaluated outside of the organization to determine that the teacher has in fact learned that new series of skills. And so this was very much one of the new concepts in the salary model that personally I'm very, very excited about, because again, I think it allows us to make sure that the opportunities that are available through that micro-credential very much tied to the goals that not only our organization but our community has. And so with the new salary agreement, in the first year of the agreement, teachers would have the ability to apply for and earn one micro-credential stack. If they do successfully complete that stack, then there is a flat $500 cumulative increase that goes on to their salary in the following year. In the subsequent years of the agreement, then teachers can pursue and earn up to 2 stacks, which again are compensated at that same level of $500 per stack. And again, the agreement calls for a committee that will come together annually to develop that list of the available micro-credential stacks that teachers would be able to choose from. One of the other pieces, again, as a part of the compensation structure, at both the middle and the high school levels, we do have opportunities for teachers that are engaged in instructional leadership activities, department chairs at the high school, team leaders at the middle school, to receive a stipend for the year in which they are providing that service to the school community. We did not have that at the elementary level, and so we've specifically called out a $300 stipend. That is not added cumulatively to the salary, it's a stipend. So in a year that an elementary teacher is serving on that instructional leadership team, they do get the stipend that year, and in a future year, if they're not, that stipend does not carry forward. It goes to whoever replaces that teacher. And again, we did agree to increase that extracurricular stipend schedule by 2%. So those are the highlights. I again thank both bargaining teams. Certainly WWEA, I know there's some representatives from WWEA here, as well as the district bargaining team for coming together and working very, very hard on this new agreement. I think it very much serves the interest both of the district, the community, and our teachers that we very, very much appreciate and thank and respect. So I wholeheartedly recommend this evening that the board approve the new collective bargaining agreement.
Comments or questions from board members?
I'll start out. I also want to say thank you. I look at what's happened in surrounding districts in terms of collective bargaining, and I feel like in our district, it's not two sides of the table, it's a group working together. And so I definitely appreciate that, as well as I think a main reason we're here today is that the past 2 years was the work. Dr. Schuler mentioned tonight the U.S. News and World Report, and we can look at school report cards, and we can look at all of these different data points. But there are things we can't measure by a data point. And I just want to point those out because I really appreciate that with our teachers, and I think that's what makes us stand out as a district. You know, as board members, like today I was able to be at Madison, and I can see things that are happening in the classroom. But there are so many unsung things that we don't hear about. We don't hear about the teacher that purchased extra supplies for the kids in their room that didn't have any. We don't hear about those that go to a baseball game and cheer on their students, or those who do a home visit when kids are sick. So I thought today I could say wonderful things about our teachers, but I decided to ask my own children. So my junior at Wheaton North said to me, I said, what do you appreciate about your teachers? My teachers care more about me, more about my takeaways than a grade. And I thought that was really, really an important one. There are teachers that make a point to say good morning to me and talk to me every day, and I've never had those teachers. My teachers try and get to know me and connect with me. This is why I want to be a teacher one day. And then I contacted my daughter, who's a freshman at Taylor, and I said, tell me what you remember about your teachers in our district. And she said, my teachers wanted to know me inside and outside of the classroom, and I loved seeing them at community events or football games because it showed me they cared. And so I just want to say thank you to our staff and our teachers for coming together with a 4-year agreement, because that does provide us a lot of stability too in the next few years. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other board members? Chris.
There you go. I wanted to echo everything that Chris has said. I mean, I've only been on the board for a year, and I've been trying to get into the schools and see what's going on, and I'm amazed by the innovation. I'm amazed by the energy. Part of the new agreement is adjusting hours of day that they're in the buildings, and none of our teachers limit the amount of time they spend thinking and doing things on behalf of our kids, the amount of time they're in the classroom in the first place, and they're out coming up with innovative ideas for how to design their classrooms. They got their families building, innovative furniture in their garages, and it's just amazing the going beyond that they do. And I was very struck when we talked to the Wheaton North students in our chat with the board, and how we were asking them what's good, what's bad, what can we do better, and every one of them wanted to tell us that it was the teachers that made the difference to them in their experience, not just senior year, but all the way going through school. And particularly that kind of comment that teachers look out for me and have been a part of my experience who were not even my classroom teachers, which I think says a lot about just the culture. But we did spend a lot of time talking about the parameters to set on this bargaining process. I got a very good appreciation for the couple of years that went into planning this new salary schedule and how unique that was compared to other districts in the area. So that's not a small thing. And I really appreciate the fact that we're trying to compensate teachers or build incentives into their packages that help them not just get reimbursed for sticking it out another year, but for doing things that can improve what's happening in the classroom for our kids. And that's reflected in this agreement as well. I believe it's completely appropriate to give them cost of living increases so that the money they make next year is not worth less than the money they're making this year. So I don't have a problem with the increase they're getting either. What else do I have to say? Again, I think it's very appropriate that we're hopefully going to approve this contract in the middle of Teacher Appreciation Week, because I really do appreciate the teachers here in this district.
Yeah, just one couple things, yeah. I rarely say this, but so professionally, I'm a senior officer of a $6 billion publicly traded company, and we have over 50 plants, many of which are highly organized, and been witness to and part of many negotiations. What I saw here was entirely different, just from my experience. 2 years of collaboration, teacher leaders, union leaders, district leaders, all coming together under a common objective and a common goal. And bargaining's hard. It is not easy. And I know this wasn't easy either. This was not an easy bargain. But it took everyone's dedication to sharing what's important to them and sharing what they're willing to negotiate on. And I am just so impressed by the leadership teams who were involved in this. And I think it'd be a disservice to not call them out. I don't know people's names directly, but that those teams did a phenomenal job, especially the team that collaborated for over 2 years. And what do we call that group, Joe? I don't remember what we called it.
We call it strategic compensation.
Yeah, that was an incredibly unique approach, and I think it's completely. And I think Chris said it. That's why we're here. And man, it was very impressive. And just to again maybe acknowledge Dr. Rammer's role in that and what he's done for not only this agreement, but for our district as a whole, and we're going to miss him. And I wish I would have a chance to work with him longer. And but I just really thank him and all the leaders who were involved in this. So thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. We have our financial challenges as a district that are beyond just this contract, but this contract surely forms a cornerstone to give us the ability to financially plan moving forward and deal with it. And it was, this contract has, things that that one could look at pieces of and say, you know, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that. But we have to remember, number one, this is a collective negotiation. It's not a, you know, we're not dictating a choice, nor is the union dictating back to us. So, you know, these are many steps along the ways that we get to the place we're at. And I'm particularly proud of some of the things that we've done that we set in motion 3-4 years ago in the last contract. And that being the salary steps, which was kind of an automatic increase, not based on any kind of motivation or, you know, I don't want to use the word merit, but, you know, things that really were incentives that we could help define, I guess. And now we've got that in this. We've got these micro-credentials that give us the ability, both the teachers that have a choice of what they want to do, but also we can direct it, such as the technology areas and so on. So I think, again, in the big picture here, you know, one can be critical of pieces of this, but when I look at this big picture of this, it really is a cornerstone to move forward, and I anticipated this to be a much more challenging event than it had turned out to be, and I'm really proud of both sides of this agreement, that, you know, we got it done, we didn't disturb the community. You know, this would have been a small group compared to the group if we had labor on Western. So, you know, I really appreciate all the efforts of both sides, and really happy with what we got to.
I think what everybody else has said is I've already felt a couple of thank yous. One to the teacher group, especially Dr. Rammer. You probably thought this was your last big issue we had to deal with before retirement, but I think we might have one more for you. And I also want to thank specifically a member of the teacher group that taught my own daughters, who's sitting in the front row. I know it's a hard work. It's focused on the community and the future of the district, so it's a compromise, and I think it turned out very successful for everybody. I love the micro-credentials, that concept that really focuses our expense or our investment in activities that have a direct impact on student achievement, which is what we excuse me, set out to do at the very beginning of this. So overall, I recognize that you know, maybe we didn't get everything we wanted, but I think for the community and the teachers and for our students and the school district, it's a great compromise, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Ben. Jim?
Yes, I've got a prepared statement. I echo all the wonderful comments made by my peer group here, but I take a different approach to this item on the agenda tonight. The financial challenges facing the district continue, but at the same time, the many needs within the district cannot be ignored. These needs include building maintenance, capital improvements, secure entries, and early learning center, just to highlight a few. Additionally, the board and the district must maintain a balanced budget and operate within financial guidelines, such as the Sherman-Durgis and fund balance policies. Since new revenue sources are limited and unpredictable, it is incumbent upon the Finance Committee, of which I serve, the board and the district, to identify and take advantage of any cost avoidance opportunity. The associated savings can then be used to address the needs within the district. Tonight, the board is asked to approve a 4-year teacher contract, and if approved, the financial impact of this contract will place the district in deeper financial stress. The current 5-year budget forecast reflects a deficit totaling nearly $8 million. Approval of this contract would add an additional $13 million, pushing the total 5-year deficit to $21 million. The district's current financial situation cannot support this proposed measure. If this contract is approved, the board and the district will need to explore and identify other opportunities that offset the $21 million deficit. This could include issuing a non-referendum bond to raise needed capital, deferring building maintenance, deferring capital improvements, or staff and program reductions. There are also other financial challenges the district may face in the future, such as a property tax freeze and a pension shift. Either would place the district in financial turmoil. Because of these current and potential future financial challenges facing the district, I will not support the proposed teacher contract as presented.
I rarely use my personal privilege as president, but I want to make the last comment and point out the representative of the WWE that was on the negotiating team, has led the negotiating team for a while, Lynn Miller, has done a great job, along with Bob. have related before that when my oldest son was about to enter kindergarten at Wheaton in 1985, we had our last strike. And I can remember Dan coming home just brokenhearted because he couldn't go to school. He'd been looking forward to going to kindergarten. And I think the strike lasted about a week, and that's the last strike we've had. Now, things haven't been peaches and cream the entire time since then, but certainly in the last 10 years, and I know from the time that I've been on the board for the last 7 years, I've been amazed at the goodwill, the good faith, and the dedication both collective bargaining teams have devoted to this process over the years. And we're fully aware of our challenges, financial challenges. We know what we need to do for our capital maintenance requirements. We are exploring alternatives. We'll identify means to meet our challenges effectively as we have done over the years. As Bob Luce pointed out, we've had a balanced budget now for the time that both Jim and I have been on the board, and we've negotiated collective bargaining agreements over that time. So I'm confident that we will meet our challenges. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate the way that both sides tackled the step issue and approached it. If we had continued the steps in our collective bargaining agreement, the financial burdens over the years would have become tremendous. And we come up with a creative way to address that enhances the professional development of our teachers and incentivizes them as they should be incentivized, and also incentivizes them to take on leadership positions. And this is what our community has asked for, and this is what our teachers have given. We've reached agreement on this point. So I think we need to, I'm convinced that we should approve this contract. It's a good deal for both sides, and my vote is going to be in favor of it. Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve the WWEA contract?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Erickson.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Paulson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
No.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Groman?
Yes, the board has approved the WWEA contract.
How about this?
And our third action item for tonight is the approval of high school, middle school, and elementary school student handbooks for the 2018-19 school year. Dr. Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Broman. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Rammer to make a couple of introductory comments, set context for the handbook approval, and then we'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. I thought I'd first start with providing the purpose for these handbooks, just for clarification, so that we understand why we put these books together. First and foremost, it is to comply with requirements of state code, state law, of our own district policies and procedures, and simply to provide an opportunity to notify student and parents of those kinds of requirements. The handbooks are a resource guide. They are simply a compendium of much of the legal requirements that we are obligated to provide. It provides a place for general student and parent information related to their respective schools at their respective levels. It is not, as much as we would like it to be, a public relations document to be read on an elevator. They are very long, but they're long because of the requirements and the necessity to put information that students and parents need in one place for them to reference. The contents were appropriate, are level specific, and as you review those, you see some different pieces in the different levels, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, or required by law or by school code. There is language in all three levels that are identical and verbatim. The process for the approval of these handbooks is a year-long kind of procedure. Our building administrators take notes, make comments, raise questions, and write in the margin of their handbooks all year long about things that they deal with that need either to be clarified or added or removed during the course of the year. And then annually, in the springtime, we sit down with administrators from each level and review those edits, those corrections, modifications. We update changes required by changes in the law or our policies or procedures. This year, if you recall, we had a state review of the ROE audit that recommended a number of additions to those handbooks. The revisions are then presented to the District Parent Teacher Advisory Committee, which is a group that is mandated by state code under School Code 105 ILS 5-10-20.14. The state law says that group that we have formed must review and then recommend those changes to the board for your approval. We met up with that group on the 19th of April. They reviewed all of the changes in all three levels and recommended that the board approve those as reviewed. The other obligation for that parent advisory group is to review the reciprocal reporting agreements that we have with all of our police municipality groups, our first responding police organizations. So each of those agencies have a reciprocal reporting agreement with us that says we can share information with them, they can share information with us, and the parameters upon which those are shared. These handbooks are dynamic documents. They are continuously changing, and given the history and the propensity of our state legislature, these books will get bigger. Every year there are more requirements that districts have to do, and a great majority of them say we have to notify parents about those, and therefore we have to put that information in those books. All handbooks are online. They will continue to be online for reference for parents and students. Our high school and middle schools will get hard copies that are combined with their daily planners, with their planners. Both levels believe that was an important resource for students to use as they measure assignments and look at due dates. The elementary handbooks will continue to be online, but we'll have a limited number of hard copies available to those parents. So with that kind of brief introduction, I would certainly support the recommendation of the student or the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee and the recommendation of the administration to approve those handbooks as they were presented.
Questions, comments from board members? Bob?
Since I'm the one who asked that we move it to an action item, I'll start the conversation. Board members know this is the third year I'm talking about handbooks, but I've decided I'm going to come with some kind of a solution, something that I think is a possible solution with handbook. I am not opposed to a handbook. I want to make that very clear. What I am opposed to is expecting our parents and students, and I'm going to use high school as an example, to read and sign that they have read. I pulled out the sheet. We are asking our parents and students to sign this off on this. Your signature indicates that you have read and understand the policies, procedures, and regulations contained in the parent-student handbook. Your signature also indicates that you understand and agree that your child will be held accountable for the behavior and consequences outlined in the handbook, both during the regular school day and co-curricular activities. So we are asking them to sign off on 61 pages that they have read. My suggestion is we take this handbook and we move it to the back of the planner. And in the front of the planner would be the disciplinary things that we are asking our parents and students to sign off that they've read. It's a much smaller, comprehensive, easily, a better readability opportunity for them to possibly sit down and actually read it and talk about it. Right now, our disciplinary policy starts on page 39. We're expecting parents to read things like the lost and found, what to do if your child is sick, calling in your child, all of that before we actually get to the discipline. And as board members, when we have to expel a student, this is the piece of evidence we see first. I would really appreciate that it was maybe something that they actually took the time to read, then be buried on, starting on page 39, all the discipline stuff. So, I am asking that we either table the vote tonight. We voted in June last year. I'm asking that we move the handbook. I'm not saying get rid of it. Add to it more if there's important information for it to be a resource. Put it in the back, but let's have parents and students sign off on what we are asking them to sign off on, that they understand the policies and the procedures that we're asking for. That's my suggestion. Oh, and one thing. I was in Madison today, and on the wall I took a picture of a bulletin board in the office. It says a fixed mindset says that this is good enough. A growth mindset says this is really my best work. I don't think this is the best way we can do it.
I have a question.
Gina?
I have a question. Are there specific sections of each level of handbook that can be identified that are what falls under code, Illinois law that we're having parents sign off on? I'm sure we're not having them sign off on lost and found procedures and head lice and whatnot, but so is it easy? I mean, I've scrolled through these things online, so it's kind of hard to go through them, but is it easy to identify what the really important, obviously discipline is one, but sections that could then be put in that area? Like Chris, when you're asking for some of it to be put up front, do you know specifically which pieces you're asking for?
What I'm asking for? Yeah, so I'm asking for things like the things that were maybe going to be causing disciplinary issues. So some of the behavior things, maybe the drugs, those kinds of things that would require maybe suspension, expulsion, opportunities. The things that actually we're required to have parents sign off on. I don't think we're required to have them sign off on 63 pages worth of material.
And this question, I guess, is for Bob. I mean, is there a way to identify what those sections are that are covered by the consent forms?
Well, certainly the discipline part is the required, but there's also requirements for notices. For example, uniform grievances are required to notice. Parents and students are responsible for all the information in there, whether it's a consequence or not, whether it's in terms of technology. They're held accountable for appropriate use, and that's a big section of it. It's not a disciplinary section, but it's a section in terms of internet use. And so, you know, yes, is there a requirement that we have to tell them about lost and found? No. And I think the concern in putting it in the front is the first thing that somebody opens up says this is what you're going to get punished for. It doesn't seem to be a very user-friendly in terms of, here's the first blush to the school district is here's what you're going to be punished for. And I think regardless of where you put it, parents are either going to read it or they're not going to read it. I understand 63 pages or 61 pages are a lot, but again, those are reference pages, and I think just like we're expected to read documents when we take out a mortgage, or the documents that we talked about today for the bonds, those are things that we have an obligation to do, and to reconfigure it, we certainly can. I just don't think it won't change the length, and it won't change whether people read it or not.
Oh, I think I was Chris's shadow the past couple of years. Similar issues, and I guess looking back, my issues were more about outdated content than it was length. I look back at some of my comments in video as well as email, and I feel confident that we've addressed the issues that I had identified before. I actually came up with the same 2-section comment without talking to Chris about is there a way to kind of separate the code required items and the district policy versus the kind of operational procedures that are probably more important than day to day. So if there's a way to maybe organize the handbook into 2 parts, I would support that. We do have time to do that. There is one item that I brought up last year that I can't get the stone out of my shoe on. I'm an architect, not an English major, so I pay really close attention to the details. So there's some very specific language that may come back to us if we had to deal with a student discipline issue. It's under discipline policies and procedures under prohibited misconduct. I've read repeatedly items 4, 5, 6, and 12. I don't think they're written in a manner that describe what the prohibited conduct is. I would encourage the team to go back and look at those. Again, it's a very detailed item. You can go through all the items before and talk about using and possessing, and then you get to those 4 items and there's nothing actually prohibited the way I read it. So I would just ask the group to go back, look back at 4, 5, 6, and 12 within that category. So is it perfect? No. I don't read the whole thing myself. I get 2 of them. We do sign them. Maybe I read them already at the meetings here, but I don't know a way around that, but I would love to see if there's a way to separate them into the pieces that are required versus the pieces that are maybe applicable to the day-to-day work of a student and parent.
I have a comment about that same thing, and just in thinking it through from a parental standpoint, I was the nerd mom that actually liked looking at the handbook and flipping through and seeing how they do things at this school and that school. The day-to-day operational user pieces might be easier to use if they were separated by the uniform grievance. It's a long section of legalese looking stuff, and I know that the disciplinary part is very important, but it might be easier to notice it if it's sat sort of up in its own spot too. So, maybe the little stuff, the operational stuff separately, that might make an easier way to look at it. I also had a couple of questions just in terms of, having this presented in the HR policy committee, I had a good appreciation for the number of levels of scrutiny this gets and who's knocking their heads about it and making changes and whatnot. So I assumed I don't need to proofread something because I'm one more body, but in scrolling through these, the consent forms don't all seem uniform, and I was just curious, I didn't find any consent forms in the copy that we got online for the middle school. The elementary school had the 1 page, but it didn't have the internet or the photo release. So do I assume those are in there and we'll just not see them in this copy? The other piece was at high school, there seems to be, not a big deal, but there's a 1-page thing that has a little checkbox if you don't want your student to use the internet. And then the very next page, there's a whole separate internet piece, so there's some duplication there. So just in terms of proofreading, I have those questions.
Yeah, those internet photos, that's all online when people register. Those are just placeholders in there. When people register, they make those either affirm or deny those when they do the registration and click those boxes on that. And the permission form is also online as opposed to the page, and that, again, that's a placeholder just so that when we print those, if we hand one out instead of somebody giving it online, there's a place to put that in.
I have an observation, not a suggestion how to fix it, which is only half the challenge. But in my opinion, from how I behave, and as a parent, and I know I'm probably not alone in this, I wouldn't consume the document. I just wouldn't. And so it may not be able to be changed, and I don't know how you would change it. But if we have time, I would like to ask that we talk about, can we structure it in a way where it can be consumed in an easier fashion? And the answer may be it can't. And I don't know if splitting it would be an answer. I don't know if I don't know if having more reference pages up front would help that. I just know my reaction to it after I read it online here in the prep we had for the meeting. I didn't consume it. So my observation is I don't think it's consumable in a realistic way, but the answer may be there's nothing you can do about it. This is how you have to write a handbook. So I don't have an answer, but my feedback would be I wouldn't read it and I wouldn't consume it appropriately.
That sounds.
Well, not only do I serve on the HR policy committee, but I also serve on the communication committee, and this summer, our website's going to be redesigned and made much more user-friendly. We've seen a mock-up of it, but it still needs to be refined. And it's my understanding that information, what I would call the soft information about parking and lighting the hair and whatever, that soft information is going to be available online. And with the digital society we are in now, I'm wondering how many people actually turn to a book as opposed to going online for looking for segmented bits of information or isolated bits of information. And so I was kind of satisfied when I learned about how we are redesigning our website that soft information is going to be readily available. So I don't have as hard feelings or big feelings about the handbook.
I'll just add one thing. We've talked about a lot of different major issues as a board, and this might seem like a very, very small element, but I think this might be the only document that we approve that every parent in the entire district has to have. So I see great value and benefit in always trying to improve it. Let's try to make it better. Let's try to make it more consumable. Let's change. Let's try to make it something that represents the kind of district and the innovation that we want to do. I understand what we have to do, but we can still work around what we have to do. And so I would really encourage coming back, maybe reorganizing this into pieces. We've got time, I think, to do this in June. Maybe the policy committee can review this in the interim if we don't have time, but that's kind of where my head is right now.
I've listening to this, I think there's some, maybe we have to change the consent form and make it a little different. When I go to a physician's office, I sign a HIPAA form that says, if you want more information, this is where you get it. And I think maybe what we need to do here is have that kind of overview form that says, I understand there's a handbook, that handbook has references, that if you have questions, you can refer to those sections, and that, that in effect that, if you have any questions about specifics, feel free to contact the appropriate parties and so on, but more what I would call an affirmative understanding of what the book is, versus I read all 63 pages. So, at least give it a reference to the point that you have that understanding. If you want to look at it, you have a source to do that. And I think that might eliminate a lot of those, components that we're talking about right now, and make this easier and also not refer or misrepresent. I was just thinking about today how many apps I clicked, I accept on. Believe me, I didn't read them all. But, so in that, this is a little different, obviously, but, my point is that I think if we have just an acknowledgement that this is an understanding, I've been given the handbook, and that I know how to look something up, and I think that might achieve what we're trying to get to here.
That's not sufficient for the disciplinary procedures.
Then I'd add that in there specifically, say, on the disciplinary issues, these are very specific and you must read these or something. Again, I think I'm trying to get to a point where it's an overview document, it gives me solid information, and that maybe refers to some key sections then, disciplinary or whatever. Because again, I don't know that I'd want to have Sunday basically defense or listen to this topic conversation we had now and say that I didn't read all 63 pages, but I signed off on it. Because I know, as a school board member, I know that you didn't, okay? And so on. So, I don't know how that works in a legal sense. So, I just think that, again, maybe the key words we have to, refer to, that's fine. And maybe if we adopt kind of a cover sheet or something like that would be helpful. That would be my thought.
So I want to clarify. I'm not asking we take anything out. I'm asking, is there a way to restructure it? So I think I was clear, but I want to be very clear that I'm not asking you to take anything out, because I think it's important that people get all the content.
Nor was I.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. I just want to make sure that we're having people sign off on the important things that we want them to sign off on, and all the reference stuff we can add to the reference stuff even is in the back or elsewhere.
Well, what's before the board right now is approval of the high school, middle school, and elementary school student handbooks for the 2018-19 school year as presented tonight. So that's what's before the board.
That was Brad's question.
Can you basically table?
Can we table?
Well, let me kind of go ahead. We either approve it tonight or disapprove it, because if we disapprove it, then the staff has to go back and they've heard what we said tonight. And if I'm wrong, Dr. Stewart, please correct me, but then come back if possible with kind of a revised handbook in June.
It would. So again, what is in front of you is what's gone through our process of approval of handbooks. If the board votes that down tonight, then we've got to go back and attempt to figure out what it is. Now, we will have to bring that all the way back through that handbook approval process as well. So if we are changing this materially, then we've got to bring it all the way back through the parent committee as well.
I think we're just talking about reorganizing the content, not changing or eliminating any content. So that was a way to shortcut that process. Sounds like it might be able to.
Or make it move quickly.
Well, that's the case. I mean, the administration was going to have to make the decision on whether it needs to go through the entire process fully, or if it can be cut in any way and still comply with the policies, and requirements, and then come back to us, if indeed we vote this item down tonight. I'm going to ask for a motion and a second for approval of the high school, middle school, and elementary school student handbooks for the 2018-19 school year.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Crabtree.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call a roll?
Mrs. Crabtree,
No.
Mr. Hanlon,
No.
Mrs. Erickson,
No.
Mr. Gambiani,
No.
Mr. Matheson,
I'm abstaining.
Mr. Paulson,
No.
Mr. Roman.
Yes. The motion is defeated. We now move to the discussion item. We're going to address the discussion of policy 7.40, non-public school students, including parochial and Holden school students. Dr. Schuler?
So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Rammer again, who's going to provide a little bit of background context for discussion, and then we are going to entertain some feedback from the board. I want to clarify, this is not an action item tonight. The board is not taking any action. What you are doing, if anything, from the discussion tonight is obviously providing us direction as to what you may want to see come back to the board in the future.
And if I may add, since the HR Policy Committee reviewed this policy last week after Dr. Rammer gives his background comments, Mr. Erickson and myself will kind of summarize what we reviewed in the HR Policy Committee last week.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Mr. Roman, thought we begin with the explanation of the reason for the change in the policy. The previous policy had the eligibility hours course content at 20. IHSA changed that requirement to 25 course hours, which necessitated us to review the policy about private and public or private students participating in activities. So we began that review and started the change in policy based on that marker. Concurrently, we noticed, or we were made aware of, that there were some homeschool students who were also enrolled in co-schools or other schools, in addition to being enrolled at one of our high schools, which is a violation of IHSA policy. So we began to take a look at a deep review of the policy to make sure that there weren't any other nuances or specifics in IHSA rules that we weren't complying with or needed to be modified, and as long as we were going to review that policy to begin with. So we began to include the component to be consistent with the state regulation that students cannot be enrolled in more than one school. And believe that we're pretty clear about what that establishes. The district, by IHSA rule, also must certify and verify the grades, the courses, and attendance equally for all students who participate in interscholastic athletics. And that IHSA says it is the member school's responsibility to verify those components. It also indicates that all courses considered for eligibility must be granted toward District 200 graduation. And now, up until this time, we had accepted those courses but didn't count them toward graduation, and that was clearly an error on our part. We accepted the courses but didn't count them toward graduation as identified in the IHSA rule, and believed that it was necessary to include that explicitly in that policy. So we changed the 740 and brought it forward with those changes in it. We also determined at that time that it would be appropriate to be consistent across all three grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school, so as not to different rules for different grade levels. Now, I guess a little bit in hindsight, and certainly being sensitive to the comments by the community, and let me add that I am very appreciative of the respectful way that the community has approached this issue, and certainly as we reviewed 7.40, it was never by intent, design, or implication that we exclude homeschool students from participation. I think we've noted in a couple of places that a vast majority of schools in our conferences, current and new ones, do not allow homeschool to participate at all. And yet we wanted to be sure where we could allow that participation to continue. Given the concern that we've heard from the board members and certainly by the community, we would offer that some options that for you to consider and maybe revise this policy moving forward. We strongly believe that the current policy that has been approved remain for high school athletics. We think that it's necessary for us to be able to verify those courses, attendance and grades and records and all of that, and that it be part of the high school graduation, that students should be enrolled in District 200 for 5 classes for that to happen. So that component we would strongly urge the board to continue. However, in that IHSA rules do not apply to activities, elementary or middle school, we could certainly revert those levels back to the previous policy and let participation in athletics, activities at the elementary and middle school, and activities at the high school be conditioned as it was before without the enrollment of those 5 classes. Again, in both conditions, it does not prevent any student from part-time participation in classes. Students can take 1 class, 2 class, 3 classes, as many classes as they want. The caveat obviously is if they're going to participate in IHSA rule, we need, in our opinion, to be consistent with those regulations so not to compromise the eligibility of an entire team by not complying explicitly with that, and second, be sure that the courses that we are putting on our transcript are consistent with the courses that our resident students have on those transcripts, and that we can verify content, attendance, and grades for equality for all students that are participating. So we would certainly be willing to bring back a revision of the policy next in June with the conditions of participation in high school activities, elementary and middle school athletics, or middle school athletics and activities, and elementary school activities based primarily on the previous board policy acceptance and enrollment piece, which would remove the enrollment in 5 classes.
Thank you, Bob. The HR Policy Committee met on May 1st at 10:30 here in the School Service Center. We had about 10 to 15 residents attend the meeting. We heard public comments. They were as respectful, courteous, and I thought generated a productive dialogue as the comments we heard tonight, and for that I appreciate what our residents have demonstrated. And since then, we received a number of additional emails, including one from Mr. Mark Millen, who gave some historical background to the original version of 7.40. I think everyone has seen that, and I'll address some of the points a little bit later. And at that meeting, Bob, as he did tonight, gave some background as to what generated the proposed changes to policy 7.140. Julie Cavallini was attending and gave us some very useful information. Julie is the assistant principal at Wheaton North High School, and she described the process under which homeschool students enroll and the process she follows to review the course outlines that are presented and record the information she receives from parents on the child student's performance and progress on a spreadsheet. And as Bob pointed out, homeschool students who complete those homeschool courses do not get credit towards graduation at our high schools. They get credit for the taking of the course, but not credit for graduation, which is not consistent with the version of the current HSA policy. Jenna asked a number of questions. She did a lot of homework ahead of time. I'm going to ask her to speak later to that aspect of the committee meeting and the due diligence and homework she has performed. I asked what other DVC schools do, and as Dr. Raymer pointed out, a number of our other DVC schools do not allow homeschool participation at all in IHSA sponsored sports. I asked Bob to remind me of, perhaps those on the board have been here for a couple of years, remember that a couple of years ago we had a community contact from a parent of a middle school student who was attending, I think, Monroe, and that parent was very upset when that student was cut from the soccer team there, and a homeschool student was allowed to participate in the soccer team, and he was just upset, the parent was upset, and we got over that, but I asked Bob to remind us of that. So there is some concern from parents of students who attend our schools about the competition they face in the cut sports with homeschool students. And then Bob did note that in the last couple of years or so, we've had one minor sport sanctioned from the IHSA that didn't involve a homeschool student, but the IHSA does monitor our sports program not only in this district but throughout the state, so that we are aware of their participation, of their supervision. And then we received public comments. And the public comments we received, some noted that the revised rule was unnecessarily broad because it included middle school and club participation. And as Bob pointed out, it was originally written, the revision was originally written that way for consistency purposes. But as is indicated tonight in the conversations that Jim and I have had individually with a number of you, we think that there's some flexibility there, that there's really no IHSA reason to include middle school sports in the current version of 7.40, as well as club activities. And we've always allowed, for example, homeschool students who've attended our schools to participate for band or music reasons, music classes, to participate in musical programs at all of our schools. And so we think there's some flexibility there. Same with club participation. A number of residents got up and said we are taxpayers and we are contributing to your schools, and we thank them for that. We thank all taxpayers for what they do to our schools. My view is that this is not a tax issue. This is an IHSA issue as to what the IHSA requires of all students, whether they're homeschooled or attending our schools, or full-time attendance of our schools. Some comments we have heard that we are discriminating against homeschoolers. Not at all. We appreciate the homeschool residents that we have and what they're doing. We certainly are inviting them to participate in our schools, in our classes, in our clubs. With respect to IHSA sports, the requirement is that the homeschool student that wants to participate in IHSA sport attend 5 credit classes at our schools, in our 2 high schools, and that can happen either by taking 3 in-building classes and 2 ELO classes, and then when they can go home, they can participate in the homeschool environment at home. It's not an either-or proposition. We welcome them to participate in our schools, but we also encourage them to continue their homeschooling as well. Bob kind of hits on the point in his comments tonight. It's how do we manage, supervise, and ensure that the classes our homeschool students are taking are earning our credits towards high school graduation. All the parents that we heard from commented about how they thought our schools were safe and what a great education they received. And in providing that education, in my view, we have an obligation to maintain the integrity of the value of the degree from our high schools. And that degree means something not only to colleges and universities, but for a great variety of purposes, for employment and so forth. And so that, in my view, we have an obligation to ensure that those students who are earning credits towards our high school graduation are attending classes that are substantive, that are preparing them for college or careers. And how do we do that? We monitor and audit what goes in our classrooms. Our principals are the instructional leaders in all of our buildings. And they observe what our teachers are doing in those classrooms. We constantly assess the performance of our students and the progress they're making. Obviously, we give them assessment tests, but apart from assessment tests, our teachers, as they teach our students, are assessing how each student is performing and the progress they're making towards what we believe they need to make to be a graduate from our high school. So, with all of that, and out of fairness to our staff and our administrators and the students and parents of our full-time students, who are all are awarded credit to graduation through our academic classes, I agree with Bob's proposal that with respect to IHSA sports, that we maintain that part of Rule 7.40 that requires students to enroll at least 5 classes for 5 credit hours towards high school graduation, and they do so in classes conducted in our buildings or through our EVO process. Gina?
All right. Okay, so I am the other board member who is on the HR policy committee. And I would just want to back up and say, I'm very sorry and I feel very bad about the way this process took place. And that falls very much on me as being a member on the committee. We first heard about this in March, I guess, because in March is when it was posted for public review. And I will flat out say I completely misread this as a routine administrative housekeeping matter. What I was hearing was we are not compliant with IHSA rules, and there was the one change from 4 classes being required per semester to 5, and therefore we must clean up our policy. We must revise it. I did not do enough digging into what the policy actually looked like. I did not ask enough questions back then about what procedurally we've been doing day to day to deal with this. I have since been asking those questions. I've read our old policy and the revision. I have read the IHSA homeschool fact sheet and the bylaws, and I've been trying to put this all together. And also the public feedback has been very informative. it was very interesting to get Mr. McMillan's message. I think that was just this week that gave us a little history that we didn't have before. That is not to say that because he's telling us that the intent of this was to absolutely include homeschool students, that's what we must do. My point is, we needed to have a bigger discussion as a board about what the policy is and says, what we think it should say, and what those piece parts are before we essentially rushed to approve a revision. Because I'm not afraid to have those conversations. Your point is well taken. As a board, it's very important that we protect the integrity of a District 200 degree. But we need to figure out what that means. And is there a way to do that that includes overseeing courses that are not taken in our school? So that is a question. I would propose that there are actually three pieces chunks we should be looking at this in. One is IHSA sports participation, and that's what we were suggesting we were changing about this in the first place. In the meantime, we broadly wiped out all extracurricular activities in other clubs at the school that had nothing to do with any kind of governing organization. So whether it's the chess club or the school play or anything like that. Furthermore, there are governing bodies for middle school sports. We don't happen to be a part of one, so we don't have any governing rules we have to follow in middle school. And I understand the concept of, well, let's be consistent. Let's not have them participating in middle school, and then all of a sudden, well, sorry, you can't do high school. There are, in fact, a set of rules we have to follow in high school. So that's fine, and I don't see any reason to take away opportunities for middle school and elementary school students. I do understand that there's an issue when you're talking about a cut sport, because then you are potentially knocking somebody else out. I have looked a little bit. We're switching athletic conferences starting next year. Went poking around to see what do our other member schools do. Interestingly, a lot of them are very vague, and now I understand why. And we don't have to do what everybody else does, so I don't really care if we're the only people in town who do it. That's just a decision we have to make. But what other teams are doing, other school districts are doing can inform us. And one little piece I saw, it's either Geneva or Batavia, I don't recall which, I think at the middle school level, specifically says that any non-public school students can participate as long as in any of the non-cut sports, in any sport that does not cut off the amount of participation. So our cross-country teams in middle school don't cut anybody out, so everybody ought to be able to run. So that makes sense to me. So I'm not saying, I have the answer, I'm saying we all need to talk about it. I do want to respond to a couple of comments we've gotten. We've had people telling us, well, again, Mr. McMillan was helpful in his email to us, but he started by telling us that IHSA's original intent was to prohibit students from participating if they weren't enrolled full-time. Later in his message to us, he said, but clearly by knocking it down to us, at a district level, they meant they wanted us to accept them. I would say by literally reading this IHSA homeschool fact sheet, IHSA passes the buck to us. I didn't understand until I read his background material that came out of the fact that they had a legal challenge to being able to constrict us in what we allow our students to do. So apparently they can't make that determination, but we can. So we can decide we want to have students who are not taking classes physically with their bodies in the chairs in our school, or we don't. But IHSA within this fact sheet says we do not prohibit homeschooled students, and then later on they say we do not mandate that member schools permit them. So they're not telling us what their rules are. Their rules are clear though. a student must be enrolled at a member high school. They explain what that means. To us that means you enroll, you register, you sign up, you submit your physical exam, you do all the things that you're required to do. I went back, I've had a different interpretation about what we've had on the books, because I went back and was dismayed to find that my reading of the old policy would suggest that we were granting credit, because I thought that was the crux of this. It says courses accepted for eligibility purposes will be recorded on official District 200 transcripts with the grades provided by the private school and so noted. Okay, the word credit for graduation is not in here, but to my way of thinking, grades on transcripts are recording what you've accumulated towards graduation, because that's what a transcript is. So I don't know why this original policy left that word out, if that was clearly part of what we have to do, because it does say the student must be granted credit toward graduation. Now, our own policy previously said that we were going to record those grades. I understand that that can be an issue, because how on earth do we ensure the integrity of those grades? We're taking somebody else's word for it. And these students might take classes from some other verifiable school, online, College of DuPage. I mean, there are options, and those are a little bit easier to verify. The parentally run class, yep, there's a question there. We have to figure out what we're going to do with that. Is the answer that those are only bypass fail? We have students within our own district who are given credits that say homeschool on their transcript, but it's a pass fail. All you see is a P. You don't get a grade for it. So can we do that? That would have to be a change to this policy. The question is that in the spirit of IHSA? Because granting credit towards graduation on paper sounds like there is the possibility that that student might someday graduate. And if we're giving them credits that are only pass-fail, most institutions, especially at the collegiate level that I know of, will limit the amount of classes they're going to let you count towards graduation that you took on a pass-fail basis. So if we're worried about somebody walking out the door with one of our diplomas who's never taken our courses, there are ways around that, and that's what we are worried about. You can make them all pass-fail, and they never in a million years are going to rack up enough credits that aren't pass-fail to get the diploma, if that's what we're worried about. So that's some of the kind of the things I would like the rest of you guys to weigh in on it, and let's tell each other how we feel on that.
I'm starting everything tonight, so I do agree for sure. I think we need to revisit the clubs, the activities, the middle school, and all of that. I think that's a completely different issue. Along with Jenna, when I read this policy the first time, I read it as IHSA was making this change, and that's why we did the policy change. I served for 2 years on the HR policy committee prior to this year, and I can tell you 98% of the policy changes are dictated by a press type of thing where it's a legal issue. And so that was my interpretation. So I do still have a few questions. Have we received any kind of legal ruling on things such as co-schooling? Like, what does that mean? I'd like to know how many students are affected by our new policy. And I'd like to know about conversations we've had with IHSA on this. I would like to have a representative from IHSA chime in on this issue. They may not, but I think it's worth an opportunity to ask them and get that on record as well. I'm still confused on what it means for credits toward graduation. and interpreting that. Like what, and maybe I'm wrong in understanding, but Dr. Rammer, I think you had mentioned that maybe we're not verifying some of that. What does that whole process look like? I think we need to understand that as a board, what that process looks like. So I know I asked him a bunch of questions out there, but maybe we can start with some of them.
You asking us to respond to those things tonight, Chris, or are you giving us?
I mean, you don't have to if we're going to have if we're going to be revisiting. But I definitely have questions such as the co-schooling conversations that we've had, how many students are participating, and a better understanding of what it means to verify those credits for graduation. Because I'm confused on that.
I've got a couple comments. First off, I think any conversation, the ISHA is truly an athletic association. So anything we talk about, whether it be any club, organization, band, any of those, we shouldn't eliminate anybody from that. If it's available, that's available. With any class, how is that different than any class? Is there a cost or something that we incur because of it? I don't understand why we brought that into the topic, and I don't think we should have that in there at all. The other issue, as I recall back in my days of athletics and so on, there was always concern about students making grades. Okay, and if you didn't make your grade, you couldn't play that weekend. So, my point is that how do we get over that hurdle? I guess I need to know the answer to that. I also, we're talking about a child being affected because they can't compete that week. I don't know that we want to win a conference championship or compete in a season of conference and have 60 or 100 other kids affected by it because we had a ISA ineligible participant. So I think those are the questions that have come up to me when we're talking about this. The middle school issue, on one hand, I don't think we should be dealing with it. On the other hand, I hate to bring a kid along, through the whole process, and then he hits high school and he's the best, cross-country runner in the conference, and then he can't compete at the high school level. But if that's the rule, that's the rule. And I don't want to have the other 60 kids affected by it. So, those are the concerns I have. And I think the point about graduation, I'm not clear, if I graduate and I'm homeschooled and I don't participate and there's credits toward Wheaton, Warrenville, South, or whatever, and I say, what do I put in my application? I graduated from Wheaton, Warrenville, South, or is that a true statement or not? I'm a little bit confused. So, I'd like to get some clarity just on understanding that.
I went to IHSA today and looked at the web. I wanted to understand what they actually covered, right? Because we're saying it's just athletics, but I believe the issue, or one of the issues we're talking about, is one of the potential, and there was commentary that we've never had this happen, and I don't know for sure, but I'm willing to accept that. But the ramifications is that teams can be disqualified from competing if the rule is deemed to be broken. And when I look at the IHSA site, there's other state competitions that they govern, from what I can tell. And I think we have to be aware of that, right? It's not just sports. There's other things they govern, state competitions they govern, and we have to be aware. I'm not saying we react to it, I'm just saying be aware of it. Second thing, there's one phrase that I think has ambiguity and will continue if we don't address it, and that's the phrase, we said it, Chris, the phrase co-school, because I don't know what that means in detail and technically. I know what they are in the area, I've heard of them, but in the context of what we're trying to accomplish, what does that mean? The second question I have is the verification process, which Chris also brought up. I know very little about the verification process. Is there a tremendous amount of overhead and administration to it? What actually happens? And I think we need to understand more about what that really means. The last thing I'll say is I appreciate how this process works. Because as Jen and Chris, I read it. I said, it sounds good to me when I read it, when I prepped for the meeting. And it did. In fact, I wasn't here to vote. I was actually not here. But I would have voted to support the change because it's what I read and that's how I consume the material. Clearly, there was feedback and that's how this should work. And I love it. I love that the process works. That means a lot to me. I appreciate how the community responded. I appreciate the amount of, the way the community responded with, it was cordial. It really was free of any rancor or it was just a really great dialogue. I appreciate the work Jeff and Dr. Randall went through talking to the community, right? So that's what I love about Wheaton. This process works. So I am willing to commit to, let's continue this process and try to figure this out and get to appropriate resolution. Let's try to take some ambiguity out, at least the ambiguity I have on the two questions I had. So I appreciate the effort of everybody.
And Jim. Well, I'll start with, I would like to revisit some of this stuff. I think, first off, I respect the value for the homeschool students that participation provides, not only for the student, but for the team and the school and the community. Like a few people said, I didn't personally understand the impact of this. I've been so focused on the kids in our district. I didn't focus on the kids outside of our district. As far as I can tell, we're talking about 33 words on 2.5 lines. Maybe it's in the new policy. I don't know what was taken out. Some of that information might be relevant. So it sure seems like we can work with the group, the parents, to try to figure out how those 33 words might be refined and improved. We talked about improving already tonight. I did look at the other district policies from Batavia, Geneva, St. Charles, Lake Park, Naperville. I also looked at Downers Grove North, or Downers Grove District 99. I didn't see the same level of specificity in their policies in terms of 5 specific schools. It was, as you said, it was very generic, maybe intentionally. So I certainly think it makes sense to look at those 33 words and over 2.5 lines and spend a little bit of time. If we've got time to work on the handbook, maybe we've got time to work on this individual policy too. So that's kind of the direction I would like to take.
Jim?
Well, there's a few things that don't square with me, quite frankly. For 18 years, this policy has been in place, and now I'm hearing that there's administrative issues that aren't squaring with, measuring people, measuring students, validating, things of that nature. So, if they exist tonight, they've existed for 18 years, and that didn't seem to be an issue. So I think that needs clarification. And we've heard from the community that they are prepared to do what they need to do relative to reporting, accountability, protocol, whatever it may be. And whether that burdens us here in the district, not me personally, but the district, I get it, we need to analyze that or take it out. But is that really the issue now? And so, because something doesn't square with me. It seems to me that the focus, if we're going to take a different stance for elementary and middle school, there's something that's not quite right for me relative to the high school. Well, we're okay with the extracurricular activities, but we're not okay with the sports. So something doesn't square with me with regard to how that has been issued. Is that someone came to an athletic director and made a complaint about a situation and now we're reacting to that? I don't know that. But something's just not squaring up for me. So I believe that yes, we need to shame on all of us. A lot of mea culpas going around, myself included. We need to revisit this as quickly as we can, make sure we get community involvement, whatever the process is. But we have to revisit. I think we should revisit this.
I'd like to add too. Some other thoughts. Yes, this has been in place for 17 years and it's been fine. I do understand and appreciate if whomever in our district who is trying to oversee this program has determined, and it was brought to me, and this is why I said yes to the revision in the first place. If you tell me we realize we are not in compliance with IHSA the way it's written on this piece of paper, then I am not happy with, and I've heard this suggested out there, well, it's been fine for 17 years, nobody's given us any trouble, so why are we creating a problem for ourselves? Let's just quietly do what we're doing. I'm not happy with, I know I'm doing something, I've come to realize I'm doing something wrong, but as long as I don't get caught, I'm just going to quietly go about my business. I have a problem personally that does not square with my own personal moral code, and it really is not the way I believe we should be teaching our children. So that way of dealing with this doesn't work for me. I truly believe we have to wrestle with, as hard as it may be, is there a way to comply with IHSA in a reasonable way? If that's possible, I don't have a problem having children join us. And I hope the entire community understands that we are all here because we love children and support them. So there's no discrimination going on. There's no us versus you. I support anybody's idea to do whatever they want to do to educate their children, piece parts, all private, all parochial, all homeschool, whatever. I don't have a problem with that, and I'm not saying because you choose something other than the public school, which I serve, I don't want you in here. That is not at all the case. I do believe that if there are rules we have to follow for, as I was saying, not just the sports, but whatever there are, the other activities that go to state competition and are overseen by this organization, we need to figure out how, I think we have to figure out how to make them happy and to be able to feel comfortable within the district about protecting, like I said, the education that we're providing. And there is the side piece that we haven't discussed, but I've done some poking through other policies that we have on record and thinking about how we treat our own children. And I've had this conversation with people, and we put restrictions on students who are fully enrolled in District 200 as to what they can and can't take outside of school. And so we do very much open up the issue that, do we have one set of standards for students who are enrolling as homeschool students only for the purposes of accessing our extracurriculars versus the standards we have for our own students, and what are parents going to say when Johnny next door is sitting at home studying health class and my kid's got to be in school doing the same thing. That's an issue too, but that's something we got to figure out.
And I'd just like to make one other comment. I don't know when this policy change took place, nor do I care, quite frankly. I guess the question is, if there was no policy change made, would we be reacting this way, or would it be business as usual? And so was this a reaction to a policy change, or were we being proactive and seeking that out? Because if the policy didn't get changed, we probably would have been operating going forward as we are today.
I think there are a few pieces to that. One, there was a small change to IHSA regulations where they used to say that you had to be taking 4 classes during the time that you're participating in, and in fact have to have done that the semester before you began participating in sports. And secondly, there was, as Bob said, the realization that we have students who are participating in our sports who we've come to realize are also affiliating themselves with other schools, and it seems to our way of understanding, what the district's way of understanding all along has been that you can't affiliate with more than one school at a time. So if you're enrolling, attending, and there's all that murky conversation about that with us, you can't also be enrolled and working towards we're giving you graduation credits towards our school, you can't be working towards graduation credits in another institution at the same time. So then you have to make a choice. So that was the other piece. And with that, it became okay, we've got a couple of issues here. We better revisit this entire policy. That's where, as I understand it, if I'm getting my facts straight, we're looking at the line that says we have to grant credit towards graduation. And our comment, I was told, was, oops, but we've never been doing that. And that's where I have a little bit of a quibble there, because it looks to me like it says we were supposed to be doing that, but I guess we haven't been. And I've also thrown in the comment in my conversations around the district that it's been 17 years. Our first policy was adopted in 2001. So it's been 17 years. There have been a lot of school boards and a lot of sets of administrators come through here. So the way we are doing things right now here in District 200 in terms of keeping track of courses that homeschool kids are taking could be vastly different and probably has changed many times over since the original policy went into place and the way of doing things was set up. So maybe once upon a time we were granting credits on a transcript, and for whatever reason now we're not, but we have to decide what it is we think we need to do to be in compliance if that's what we want to do.
And the IHSA is fairly clear on this. It says, the question and answer, may a student who attends a private school participate on a public schools team? Answer, no, in reference to bylaw 3.011. So when we discovered there were some co-schools in Wheaton that our homeschoolers were attending, there's a building, there's a staff, there's courses. This became an issue for the motivation to revisit the policy 7240 as well.
Jim, I know it's totally out of line for me to say something, just a point of clarification that I think will help you. That particular definition was asking if they attend a private school, so you have to look to the word attendance. And just one thing I heard the board didn't understand.
We're going to have public comments later.
I know, but it's for it's non-agenda items, so I just want you to understand how the diplomas work. The homeschoolers issue their own diplomas based on credits. That's how they get the high school diplomas. Thanks.
Any further comments or discussion?
How have we left this now? Are we going to revisit? What are we doing here?
Yeah, well, I think we've got some feedback from the board in terms of interest. I think the interest would certainly suggest that there's interest in the revision. I think we're going to need to process a little bit of that feedback and then map out a process for you to kind of work through the revisit. So I think it'd be very difficult to attempt to give you an answer to that tonight, but we'll attempt to address the feedback, take the feedback, and map out a process for you moving forward.
Moving forward, the next discussion item is Vision 2022 and the district dashboard. Dr. Schuler.
I'm going to turn this over now to Faith, who's gonna take it to just a quick recap as we're getting this last presentation set up. So we have been working on the renewal of the Vision 2022 plan for quite a while. Now wait while I'm just clearing out.
I just want to thank the board. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we've been working on the renewal of the Vision 2022 plan for a little while now, and so Faith is going to give you an update as to where we've been, kind of what we're moving in front of the board. Again, this is not for action tonight. We want to get a little bit of feedback as we bring this back to you, and then especially focus on the dashboard element to kind of see if we at least have a concept that the board is comfortable with moving forward. So Faith.
Great, thank you. As you know, we've been working on Vision 2022. If you recall, when Dr. Schuler came to the district, we took a lot of feedback from page 200 and put together Vision 2018, which then drove a lot of our school improvement plans. We're now at year 2018, so it's time to revisit and gain community feedback and rewrite this. As you recall, Vision 2018 also looked at driving the individual goals and annual goals for the board, and also created a dashboard which we communicated our progress to the community. So now we're at Vision 2022, so tonight I'm going to go over not only what those statements are with Vision 2022, but also some options for a dashboard to report our progress, and then also a calendar for board reports so that you can see how that information would be reported back to the board as well. So again, the purpose and the audience for Vision 2022 is to communicate that vision to not only our own staff, but parents and community, and then for us to work together to already have defined what our priorities are for our resources such as time and money. So as I explain this to the schools, we have all of these different things that we have, mandates, best instructional practices, all things technology, how will we do all this? We narrow the focus by getting to our strategic plan and the yearly focus, then down to the school improvement plans, then at the PLC or team levels, and then into individual classrooms. So some highlights from our Vision 2022. These are the 4 commitments in the areas of student learning, learning support systems, community and parent engagement, and then also with financial and facilities management. How was this built? A variety of groups have seen, revised, edited, commented on this piece. I want to particularly call attention to the Citizens Advisory Council that spent a lot of time on this. We spent 2 whole meetings really revising and looking at this, and a lot of the changes that you'll see tonight resulted from that. We also met with the PTA Council, and then we did something different this year, that each of the principals met with their own school staff, revised and looked through this, and then sent senior leadership team questions. I know that I responded to 190 questions and comments from the staff, which were a great opportunity to have some dialogue over. So the format has changed. If you see that in your green folder, it looks a little different than it did the last time it was here, and that was based on some feedback that the other one was cumbersome to read because of such a fine print. So we have a new layout. Also, feedback from the board here was to include a glossary of terms, and that's here. And I want to point out that when we put that on the website, you'll be able to hover over a particular term on Vision 2022, and that definition will pop up. I can't do that for you on paper, but that will be part of that process. And some of the changes on the overall are we had some passive verbs in our commitment statements, and we changed those. So I'm now going to go through each of the 4 sections and just highlight what is different from the last time that you've seen this. So with student learning, we now have a statement regarding appreciation of diversity, and we also added the concept of digital citizenship, which was included in what we were going to be doing, but it wasn't explicitly stated. When you go to learning support systems, the big change is to include the terms that we talk about a lot, PLCs, MTSS, universal access. So we've added that to the statements, but again, there'll be the glossary of terms to be able to give more information to some of those educational acronyms. When you look at community and parent engagement, the big change that we heard back from CAC, or the Citizens Advisory Council, is you need to put a part on there that says we're going to communicate progress on Vision 2022. So we've added that component. And with financial facilities and the management of that, including the component about fund balance and board policy, and there'll be a hot link on those particular areas back to our board policy, especially with Sherman Durkins. So now we get into the development of the dashboard, which is how we will spend time and energy communicating our progress on this. And we're going to show progress on key parts of Vision 2022. We do think that we will be updating the dashboard every time the board has new information in those areas, so it would happen frequently. And this is a change from the initial information that you had from the board packet, that we now have 2 options, because we just met yesterday with the Teaching and Learning Committee and got quite a bit of feedback on the dashboard. And in a nutshell, the discussion centers around how do you make something both simple and have a detail enough that it's meaningful. And we really wrestled quite a bit with that concept of how to do that. So I'm not sure that we've come to the answer today, but I want to give you 2 different options that we can react to. So option A looks like this, where we would have our goals and our commitments across the top, our current and our baseline performance in the different areas. And some of these goals that we're talking about are really easy to measure. They're things like student achievement on a test score. Other of these items are more process items, like the professional development report or the technology report. The good thing about this piece is it's very, very simple. It's just, are we above where we thought we would be, or are we at baseline, or are we going to be below? The difficult part of some of this is, well, how much above or how much below isn't indicated because it's a simple measure. And it's somewhat easy to look at, but it doesn't give as much detail. This is what it looks like for the different areas. You can see as we go to like the high quality staff, the column all the way to the right, that's an annual board report on human resources. And it becomes a little bit more cumbersome about what's above baseline, what's below baseline, because it would be have we executed the things in that plan or not. And then the same thing for the other different pieces that we are discussing. I'm going to show you a different way to look at this. For option B, we talked somewhat about, do we want to have more areas of differentiation between how well we're accomplishing those goals. So now the key is over on the left, where we have the blue kind of being that highest point where maybe we've really attained that already. In fact, it's kind of hard to make progress. I'll give an example on our graduation rate. It's already really, really high. To say that we're going to continue to make improvement of that to be a green would be cumbersome. Then green would be that we're making progress. H, the holding constant for yellow, is, well, we're about the same as we were last year. And then there could be the option that we're regressing, I hope not. And then whether there's no data available, because you'll see that some of the things, like the middle column where we're talking about making adequate growth from PSAT to SAT, we haven't had enough years of data to even say that yet, where it's a goal that we're going to be looking at, but we wouldn't have data. I toyed around last night with, do we have, so if for each of these indicators, and I'm using the word spinner, which is probably not the good, but the dial of, you could have all of those colors in there. You could, for each circle, just solidly put it in, it's all blue, it's all green, as we go through. Now I need to talk just a little bit about how we would mark these. I'm wondering about the idea of when I get up and present in September for the percentage of students for the readiness to math. For example, we're at 66% in both of those areas right now. If we go up 67%, that's still going to be holding constant in my mind. Yes, it goes up, but it's not enough significant that I would say, oh yes, we're making great progress. So my thought, and we didn't talk about this yesterday because we left with still in a lot of discussion mode, is we could, as a board and as senior leadership team, after we go through this, say, okay, what do we consider that we're at right now, given the gains that we've had, given what we haven't had, and then be able to grade ourselves across this. After we look at the human resource report, are we saying that we're holding constant? Have we made a lot of progress? Have we made great progress? And it would be more of a discussion and a dialogue on how we would report to these things. So in a nutshell, those are the two different approaches. I also want to, before we talk about it a little bit, talk about this calendar of reports for the board. We had some really great discussions, especially around student learning, of what other kinds of data do we want to have that aren't part of the student learning dashboard, if you will. Some examples that we talked about, the board was wanting to know more about how are we doing by our income subgroups and how do we look at those achievement gaps. So I've attempted to detail some of those comments that the board had said that they wanted, as well as a time of year that each of those things would happen. You'll see that in October, I've left a blank that's kind of updates on parts of Vision 2022. There are things like the writing curriculum that we will want to give an update on, but we're not necessarily ready this October, to be able to do that. So there would be pieces that we would update as the year goes on. And then the second half of the year, we have our typical items like budget, technology, our SEL, professional development, and these things, so that if we have this calendar, you'll see when we would be updating the various pieces on the dashboard. Okay, I went quickly because I know it's already 10:20 and I don't know how much energy we've got left to talk about the dashboard.
I'd like to make two comments. Number one, we now have passed a new contract, and in that contract there's a micro credential. I'd like to see how that's progressing. How many people have achieved, and maybe even the field of where they're achieving. Number one, and then number two, there may be a time that we're going to have. I'm going to use ACT or SAT or whatever scores that we're using. That maybe it could go down a little, maybe it can go up a little. I'd like to know, maybe on that chart, what is a significant movement? In other words, again, if the ACT goes from 20.1 to 20.0, is that something we're worried about or not? It's just a natural variation. So, if we can throw some kind of parameter in there that, we're far exceeding or far, beyond above expectation.
I have a question. Can you put your slide back up there with the little pretty colored wheels? So, as you learn in committee, I'm kind of slow to understand what I'm looking at with your pictures. So, I don't understand how you're using those.
So for each of these, I need to turn on my mic. So there's no arrow on here right now, so you can envision when we get done with, let me put up student, look at the first column for K-8, roads, readiness, and reading. So if the scores came back, let's go big, 73% reading. I would suggest that we would draw our arrow in there that we are making good progress. So I would put an arrow on it that indicates that we're in the green. Everything right now is blank because we haven't set up that next piece. Or if you prefer, we could color the whole thing green. So you don't have all of those colors on each of those pieces. Or you could go back to this where it is an arrow up or a solid circle or an arrow down. It's on how much detail you want versus the simplistic state. So none of the circles on here indicate anything right now. They're blank canvas of where you would put an arrow once we finish with that report.
Nice question.
Absolutely.
So by arrow, you mean a little needle sticking out of the middle that
Right.
goes back and forth?
Right, so if you think of a spinner,
Right.
you've got an arrow in the middle of it, and the arrow could either be in the orange, or in the yellow, or in the green, or in the blue.
Got it.
I think, first of all, good stuff. Second of all, I think knowing the audience, I think less is more. I think people want to get there, see it. It's very clear, very precise, and not, I'm not faulting either one. But for me, if I'm going to go to a dashboard, I want it just simple and concise, and it's really quick information and it's accurate information. I'm not looking for details. I just want to know those elements. And I think the previous charts seem to, for me and for my eyes, that seems to be an easier one to read and understand. And maybe, if need be, you could put a grid behind those arrows where there were point values that to your point, 60.1 to 60.3, that's kind of a moot point. But if it goes from 60.1 to 63, that arrow should be able to identify that would be a significant move.
Right, that's one of the things that we wrestled with, and yet each of the columns have very different scales. Where if you look at like the average ACT score, that scale is going to be very different than the percentage of students. Or if you look at the annual board report for human resources, what the gradient of that is complicated too.
In teaching and learning yesterday, that was our biggest issue, was how do we show, for example, if we go down 0.2 and that knocks us below baseline, are we automatically way at the bottom? Or if we go up a 0.2, are we automatically way up at the top? So is there a way to show some kind of gradual up and downs there that give us a little bit bigger of a picture? I'm with you. Simple is better, but this was almost too simple in some respects. We were struggling. Jen and I both were struggling with the graphic here. I love the idea though of the adding the report where we can click on and get that right there at any given time, that a community member could pick that up as well. So I think that's a very good addition.
I got 3 quick comments. I'll make them quick because I know it's late. One thing I'd love to add under maybe the metric is what is used to measure that metric. Maybe it's a link, but is it a test score? Is it a internal assessment? Is it a financial report? That would be helpful. In terms of the dashboard measurements, I agree with everything. It's got to be simple. I feel like we need an infographic specialist to really design this thing. I understand how complicated it's going to be, but simple is going to be critical. And then my final point is really when we're all done with this, we've adopted this. As I reflect back on Vision 2018, I kind of felt like every year we were kind of surfacing new ideas for the goal work plans and whatever we focus on, what's going on, tell us we need to work on. And it kind of felt like it was just one step at a time. I would like to maybe map out, have kind of a master plan for all 4 years, recognizing it's going to be fluid, that maybe here's where we're going to put our priorities, in each of the individual years. Maybe there are certain issues that might span a couple of years, to kind of at least conceptually lay out how we're going to approach this in terms of goals. I think that could be a helpful tool for the board, knowing that here's our master plan, so to speak, and we have this coming up, and maybe at the end of the year we decided we didn't finish where we wanted to be, let's continue that. So those are 3 quick comments.
Any other comments, questions from the group?
I do think the one thing that we didn't get, though, that would be helpful, because again, either of these options, we've got to work off of one of them and trying to kind of refine it into something that the board is comfortable with. So I guess I would like some sense of kind of a straw poll as to whether option A or option B you think tells kind of a better visual story, so we know which one we're working off of.
I like the A better.
Which one?
I like A better, but maybe rather than an arrow, I kind of in my mind pictured like a old-fashioned temperature gauge.
Right.
Where
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Here's where we want to be, here's where we started, here's kind of the thermometer. Yeah.
So it could be below 0.
Could be below
It could
0.
be, I like the thermometer.
Maybe there's different colors within that, but it's a little bit more simple. That's what came to my mind. I'm not an infographic specialist, but I do design.
Faith, you were cringing with that?
Well, one of the things that we talked about, if you have are we partially to the goal, are you there to the goal, is that you have to have a number that is the goal. And when we write school improvement goals, I encourage principals to set them lofty, do stretch goal. But you also don't want to have a stretch goal and set a lofty goal, and then 4 years from now have a lot of things that look like we haven't accomplished it when we really did great things. So there's some difficulty in setting some numbers that are out there, because you want to stretch the goal. As I was trying to explain this to a friend last night, I'm like, so the person who says they're going to lose 24 pounds and they come in with 22 that they lost still ought to be like, yes. And the person who says, I'm going to lose 3 pounds and loses 3 pounds when they really needed to lose 24 as well, you don't celebrate, those equal things. So it gets a little complicated in saying how much you're going to gain. And then there's also some things that play into even on student achievement that we might not know. Perhaps we get a much more influence of low-income students in the next 4 years. Perhaps we get a lot more EL students. Like there's things that you want to incorporate into that conversation about are we making progress, not making progress. And on the board reports, like the technology plan, what's the gradient on that thermometer for the tech plan without us having some conversation? That's why I came back to, when we get done with the tech plan, do we want to sit down as a board and a senior leadership team and say, hey, I think we're pretty good, we ought to be at green, or we ought to be at the next place, so we have those discussions for each of those items, is where I came to at about 4 o'clock this morning. So,
Do we have any handles on other school districts who do their dashboards and kind of monitor progress? That might be one way to look at it, talk to our benchmarks.
Certainly can. I don't think a lot of them have a public dashboard, rather, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I think a lot of them have strategic plans. Strategic plan looking more like just the Vision 2022 chart in isolation, but not necessarily that kind of public dashboard piece, but we'll certainly keep investigating it.
I did a little Google search yesterday because Teaching and Learning was the one who kind of came through and vetted this yesterday, and the state of California uses a spinner.
I didn't go to California, I swear.
You did?
I did not.
Oh, no, they use something similar to that. My suggestion is I think what you could do instead of the spinner is, as you said, use it as a solid color. So because I like the idea of 5 possible kind of gradient kind of things there. So if you said, we're green, then just color it green. You know, we're making progress. If it's blue, we've attained it or whatever, then make it all blue. And that's a simple, real quick. Look, it's blue, it's green, it's red, it's whatever. And it kind of tells you versus maybe putting an X in the little box. I think if you just did it as a solid color for one of those categories. At least now we have 5 categories instead of center, up and down. Just
Chris, I don't know if you're going to get a consensus. I vote for the spinner.
Other boards I'm involved with, it's usually a solid color that we're talking about. And basically when you look at it, then you can drill down, you see, particularly when you incorporate, what your level of achievement aspect is. And, you'll see a red mark or a yellow or a green, and you focus in on that one. And if all things are proceeding as desired, it's green. So that, why talk about it? That's really, so I think that's as simple as, if we're trying to make this simple, to me, that's the simplest way to do it.
So, Faith, you mentioned as an example only the, what if, low-income students peaks up? I'm asking, I'm not suggesting, does it make sense to have a cell down here that says, recent impacts or new occurrences that might have an impact? Just some narrative that we can enter?
I think that's going to be more in your board report. So again, I guess as we were talking about it yesterday, so I guess I want you to think of this kind of in like 2 different audiences, right? So board level monitoring around these items. Think back to the reports that Faith has done for you in the past. Just monitoring a single element like how are we doing in reading, there's a much more extensive evaluation and report that goes with that. And I think that's, Brett, where the appropriate place is for that. I mean, I think the concept of a dashboard, somewhat to Jim's point, is that there needs to be a place where I think the community in general can kind of look and understand the health of our organization, right? How are we doing? What are the areas in which we are really happy with performance? What are the areas where we're not happy with performance? We want to make some improvement, understanding that there are additional layers of detail that are going to come with, it's not up there anymore, with being able to kind of drill into the reports. So I think, that's kind of, as we were looking at this, right, this is sort of like the single page kind of simplistic view that has some drill down capability that may well explain why, I think I've used the example, the University of Illinois Chicago did probably the most comprehensive study of performance over time of school districts. And I shared with the board and the community in the past that around reading, if you look at a standardized test measure, our reading performance over a 15-year span has ticked up ever so slightly. And so you might just look at that chart in isolation and go, well, that's kind of either flatline performance or kind of barely an increase. But as they drilled into it and they looked at the transition of our student demographic over time, candidly, the fact that our performance actually ticked up at the same point that really the predictive measures that should have said actually on a standardized measure, we really should have probably seen a huge steady decline down. That is significant, right? So that you're right, there's context to all of this, and that's why I guess that conversation around like a temperature gauge, I would urge the board not to get too locked into saying for each of these areas, we're saying, gosh, reading performance, we're at 66, we gotta be at 80 in 4 years, because the reality is we have a different raw product that comes to us every year, and that can change very drastically, and our job is to take that raw product that comes to us and polish each into a diamond as much as we can. So that's why kind of this but anyway, that's kind of a long answer to saying I think we want to be able to, to kind of give a quick visual picture, understanding there are more layers to this. But
I'm okay with the color coding. It's gonna be more meaningful, to Jim's point.
Moving on, written reports, we've all received a monthly financial report and a FOIA report. Reports from board members, board committee reports, we've heard from financial report, we've heard from HR policy, but
Can you just bear with me for 1 minute, because it's so exciting. You know how I have my final examination thing that I've been, talking about for 3 years, but Dan presented to us yesterday some things that I think are so exciting, and I'm thrilled to see. So I'm going to call something out at each high school. Wheaton North Health Department. They used to give a 100-question multiple choice exam. They now have transitioned to an extended response exam. There are no longer multiple choice questions. They are using their data to refine their final examination. They looked at now where they're giving more summatives, and that's, I think, a key piece, is looking at how are we assessing all year long versus just that one assessment at the end of the year. They ask students for feedback on the examination. This new approach that they've done, they're looking at their data now, they had an 8% improvement in student scores by now switching to more of an application-based. So kudos to Wheaton North for that one. For Wheaton Warrenville South, the science department has been working over the past few years to drastically change their final examination assessment. One of the things that I thought was really exciting is where they're still using multiple choice questions, they're now having students say why I picked A and explain and apply. And in some cases, for example, physics now is all free response. So they're looking at the thought process that students are doing, and they're grading them not necessarily just on did you get the right answer, but what was your thought process thereof. So the question of final examinations is really being looked at in our high schools, and some of them are trying some, but I think are some really new and exciting things. So very excited to see that, and the conversations are still happening.
Thank you, Chris. Before we leave the board report area, each month we have a citizens action committee, and I'd like to make sure we include in future meetings a comment or a report from whoever attended the meeting, so we have some idea what's going on, and maybe a commentary on what they're what they're talking about that's of interest. Because I think we hear about their input on some of these things, but it's the first time I've heard that. So we go through a great process of having those, so I'd like to know more about it.
Topics for future discussion include Division 2022 and District Dashboard, a budget update, and the early childhood on the Early Childhood Center, community engagement report, and the 2018-19 budget. Our next regular meeting is June 13th, 2018 at 7 p.m. here at the School Service Center. And we have public comments on non-agenda items. The same rules I mentioned on agenda items apply to non-agenda items, and Mr. Paulson will be timing. Jan Shaw is the first.
I think she left.
I think she did too. Lynn Miller.
Turn the mic on? Really? I don't need a mic. Anyway, I just wanted to.
Need it for the recording.
You need it for the recording, okay. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, take a second.
Hello? It's on. Okay, there we go. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the board. And I know you guys all haven't been sitting here for 30 years, but I've been in the district for 30 years. And since I began in the district to now, the relationship between the board and the administration and the WWEA has become one of a mutual benefit for the district. We work together to solve all the problems. I've been negotiating a contract for a number of years, more than I'd like to count. And I just, since this is the last one I'm going to do, because I anticipate that I'm going to retire before we have to do this again, I just wanted to thank you publicly and tell you how much we appreciate the working relationship we have here in the district. It just benefits the kids. We took a pay freeze when the district needed us to, and you have been very kind to us, and in return we have tried to do our best for you. And I appreciate every one of you and all your comments you had before. It was great. And Mr. Gambiani, I appreciate the fact that you keep an eye on the finances of the district. We really do appreciate that, because all of us have to work together for the benefit of the kids. So just, point of personal privilege. I know I'm a little out of order, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. William, thank you. And Bob Rammer wants to speak. Are we going to limit him to 3 minutes?
Yes.
Let me get a head start on this.
Well, in that, Mr. President, in that this is public comment, and I'm not officially a member of the public until the end of next month. So I would ask you to exert privilege of the chair and consider this a staff presentation and waive the 3 minutes, if you don't mind.
It's so considered and so waived.
Thank you. Dr. Schuler, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Education, I would first like to thank you for allowing me the privilege and honor of serving the children and staff and parents of this district for the past 11 years. While I continue to be a faithful cheesehead and an avid Green Bay Packer fan, last season notwithstanding, Wheaton is our home, and Owen and I truly love living in this community. I've heard there's pretty good schools here, by the way. If I may, I'd like to provide you with a personal exit interview. This marks my 46th year in public education, and given my experiences in 2 states and multiple districts, I have 5 observations, and I hope are instructive and of interest to you. As a preface, let me mention at the outset, these are not criticisms, simply observations from nearly 5 decades in the profession. And also, as a preface, these comments are not related to any conversation tonight or this participation or any agenda items. So this was written long before this evening happened. So number 1, without reservation or hyperbole, this is an outstanding school district with an amazing team of players at every position. Our teachers, as you noted, are absolutely exceptional. Our teaching assistants care and support the children. Our facility staff provide a safe and comfortable learning spaces. Our secretaries keep our schools and district running and organized. And the administrators, the coaches of this team, set the lineup, call the plays, and win the titles we achieve and are so proud to acclaim. Sometimes we find ourselves so deep in the forest and focused on our journey that we miss the beauty and significance of our surroundings. There's something very special about what happens in District 200 every day. We often say that it's the relationships in District 200 that make the difference. I would submit a more nuanced definition to that term. In District 200, relationships mean a genuine concern for the success and well-being of someone else. There's a universal commitment on the part of the administration, faculty, and staff of this district to support each child that enters our doors, and ownership that seldom exists in other districts. When you witness the recessionals at the high school graduations and watch them form a tunnel for the graduates to pass through, and see the hugs, the tears from the graduates and the teachers and the staff, those relationships are palpable. That same bond between children and adults of this district exists every day in every one of our schools. District 200 is not just a place to come to work. It's a place where people come to support, encourage, engage, educate, and care for the children of this community. There's a sincere concern for the success and well-being of all the people of District 200. And our parents don't send their students to our schools. They send their children. And I believe there is a profound difference in that semantic subtlety. The fact that we see children in our schools and not just students, that's District 200 apart from many other school systems. The culture of caring that we like and are so successful, and the successes that we are so skillfully publicized by our public relations department, does not happen by chance, coincidence, or accident. It's purposeful. It's the product of very special people. Teachers and secretaries, aides, faculty, facility staff, and yes, your administrators. Given the quality and the achievements of this district, we need to stop looking to other districts as the gold standard to follow or emulate. We have some of the most talented and gifted educators right here in this school district. They're thoughtful and experienced and dedicated. It's not necessary to look to other districts to measure our progress, our options, our programs, or to determine what's important. Those other districts should and do look to us for answers. We need to stand tall about District 200 and never forget or apologize who we are or what we stand for. Number two, I've never been more proud of a group of administrators, including those at the central office level, as I am of the dedicated educational leaders in District 200. Every person in District 200 is critical to our overall success. However, the building principal is the keystone to the accomplishments of this and every school district. Every initiative, every goal, every strategy, every change, every program, every idea flows through your principal. They're the face of the district. They connect the district to the community and the district to the staff. You can't have a great school without a great principal. And great schools make great districts. District 200 is a great school district. Our teacher retention rate of 98% is attributable to the quality of our principal. We're quick to tout our achievements. The district rates 10th in national rankings. Our high schoolers among the top rated in the country. We have blue ribbon schools. And we applaud our national merit scholars. And the list goes on and on. Although those accomplishments are carried out by our teachers, our principals put those pieces in place. And while being a principal is the best job in the world, it's one of the most challenging. We're finding it more and more difficult to find quality administrators, and particularly at the principal level. There's an excellent article about principals on the National School Board Association website. It's in the online-only archive section, and it's entitled, "The Canary in the Cage is Choking." I encourage you to read that. There are few, if any, benefits anymore to attract people into administration, especially at the principal level, and the expectations and challenges are reaching an unreasonable proportion. With all due respect, every time the superintendent or board member comes up with a new idea, a new initiative, goal, question, or strategy, it lands right at the feet of our principals, and we rarely take anything off their plates. If we want to keep and attract great principals, we have to guard against initiative overload and recognize, appreciate, and compensate them for the role they play. The caring environment of this district that we are so quick to brag about exists because principals care about their staff and their children. They select staff who possess those values, and our students reap the benefit. The pressures and responsibilities shouldered by our principals are approaching critical levels. We want them to be instructional leaders, but the day-to-day demands make that almost impossible. Here's a partial list of what building principals have to manage, lead, and are held accountable for. Common Core, FIP, SEL, PLC, EL, referendum initiatives, math implementation, science implementation, facilities management initiatives, special education, community outreach, reading, testing, both state and local, effective instruction, assessments, transportation, student and staff discipline, instructional leadership, evaluations, hiring, safety issues and building security, budgeting, parent complaints, public relations, parent custody battles, human resources issues, visibility in and out of school, and one of the most challenging for our principals is championing the never-ending requests that come from our district office. Plus, the constantly increasing demands around social media and communications, with a barrage of emails and texts that demand immediate response 24/7, just to name a few. We've got to guard against programmatic overload of our administrators and staff. There is a discrete set of talents necessary to be a quality principal. Not every educator possesses those talents, and contrary to the common misconception, you can't train someone to be a great principal. You can hire one if they apply. Here's 4 suggestions I would offer for your consideration. Number 1, seek and listen carefully to the counsel of your principals and administrators. Allow them to be candid. Let them speak truth to power. Listen to their sense of capacity. They know how much their teachers and systems can handle. Be sensitive about your requests, initiatives, goals, and guard against initiative overload. And 4, find ways to appreciate, respect, reward, and compensate them. There has to be some tangible incentive and benefit to being an administrator or principal. Don't let the critics pressure you into undercompensating these critical people. Words of support are nice, but we are all judged by our actions. And if the actions around compensation and rewards don't match our words are hollow and actually hurtful. If the district wants to maintain the 98% retention rate of staff and administrators and continue the successes we are so proud of, it will require serious action beyond sentiments of appreciation. Number 3, one of the significant issues that continues to plague public education is the constant criticism hurled by the media, public, and even some members of our community. While we can't stop the critics, we must not be timid about countering them with pride, enthusiasm, and a firm and forceful rebuke when necessary. Because we're public servants and compensated by tax dollars does not give license to abuse or mistreatment. While people are certainly entitled to their opinions and may disagree with us, it does not give them privilege to be hostile in those disagreements. The general lack of civility we see so pervasively in society has made its way into education. It's not uncommon for our teachers, our support staff, and our administrators to be confronted by demands, charges, and criticisms well before the facts are known or an explanation provided. If we don't agree with the critics and capitulate to their demands, we're vilified and charged with being unresponsive to the community. Our decisions are seldom viewed as being thoughtful and measured, which they are. The weapon of the keyboard and social media, along with the disrespect of our profession, must be confronted. Often we respond to as public servants who just have to be polite and take the criticism so we don't offend the voter. You've heard me say, what we permit, we promote. If we permit the critics to go unchallenged, if we permit staff to be demeaned and disrespected, if we permit the vocal minority to define us or our actions, we're promoting a negative climate and a reputation that is certainly not deserved. More importantly, we're failing to protect our most valued resource, our educators, and adding to the stress and pressure of an already demanding profession. Another related challenge to this lack of civility when it comes to leading a school district is that everyone went to school. And unlike almost every other profession, people believe that makes them an expert. Look at the state of Illinois. It now says you don't need an education degree to be a substitute teacher. What message is that sending our community? Anyone can teach. You don't need any special training or talent. We don't challenge our doctors and lawyers or our plumbers or electricians, but it seems second nature in education. This is a $170 million business with 1,800 employees, with a very well-trained and experienced leadership team. And yet we are constantly barraged by people who believe they know better. People whose frame of reference may be having a child go through our system, or merely attending public school in the past. Again, by virtually every measure available, student achievement, finance, personnel, District 200 is one of the finest school systems in the state and in the country. Our success is due to leadership. Our success is a product of thoughtful choices, sound recommendations, and measured decisions made by the administration. While hindsight may provide perspective with new facts not known at the time, it cannot negate or diminish those measured choices. We need to trust and value the recommendations, opinions, and ideas of our experts, our professionals, not the amateur educators who seem to revel in second-guessing our programs and decisions. When we devalue our administrators or staff, whether by inactions or actions, by omission or commission, we are contributing to the erosion of the profession and the morale of the organization and giving credence to the critics. Number 4, beware of the shiny ball. This is not a new phenomenon, but one that I believe continues to hurt education. There's a tendency for us to look for the silver bullet of education. Since the 1993 publication of The Nation at Risk, public education has been under attack and become the punching bag for politicians and society across the country. Every politician wants to fix education. That's an easy target. Who doesn't want a good educational system? Education is like mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet. It's virtually impossible to oppose. So when a politician says he or she wants to be your next educational governor, or senator, or president, or offer ways to fix education, who wouldn't support that? However, when one says fix education, it implies that it's broken. When you look at the successes of our students across the board, I am hard pressed to identify the breakage. Certainly the major cities have issues, however, not all of them were the cause of or can be fixed by education. Now, to be clear, we are a continuously improving institution. We will never finish be getting better, but broken? Not hardly. But however, because education has allowed the politicians to define the discourse, we look for that silver bullet to fix what they claim is broken. The silver bullets come in the shape of shiny balls, and we're attracted to their sparkling, glittered initiative that some expert promises will mend the maladies that are afflicting education. Many of these shiny balls are forced on us by state and national politicians, another set of amateur educational experts, in the form of mandates, most of them unfunded. Remember open classrooms? Writing across the curriculum, block scheduling, strategic planning, total quality management, race to the top, NCOB. Each of these topics generated dozens of shiny balls purported to correct the faults of education. There's an entire industry out there of consultants and gurus who make their living by selling shiny balls, gimmicks for us to buy. What these shiny balls do are divert us from our prime directive, teaching children. It diverts valuable and limited time, resources, and energy away from our prime mission. If we simply concentrated our efforts and resources on what we do best and stop believing that the next snake oil salesman will take us to Valhalla, we'd be much better off. And finally, you've probably heard a theme in these comments. Here's the payoff, the holy grail, the fundamental truth. This is going to be on the final exam, as I see it anyway. Education is about good people. It's not about fancy courses, equipment, computers, buildings, or tricky gimmicks. It's about connection. It's about relationships. Relationships between a child and his or her teachers, and the support and guidance of administrators, facilitated by a cadre of people, secretaries, teaching assistants, facilities, and central office staff. You've heard this over and over again at your chance with high school students as recently as last month at Wheaton North. District 200 is about the people who genuinely care about the well-being and success of every child. All school boards play a critical role in a significant role in the quality of a school district. Board members come and go, and staff members remain year after year, election after election. People who deliver the quality education of District 200, whether in a classroom, fixing the leaky roof, publicizing our successes, issuing purchase orders for class supplies, answering the phone at the front office, hiring quality people, or leading the district or our schools. These people are the foundation of this district and the reason for our success, for the quality of our achievements and the quality of our standard of living in this community. Value the people you have in this district. Support them, respect them, listen to them, protect them from distractions as much as you can, defend them to the critics, champion what they do, reward and compensate their efforts, and cherish what they do for the children, for this community, and our collective future. If we take these people for granted, this district will experience irreparable harm, which will happen over time, slowly, almost without notice, until it's too late, and we lose a generation of children before it can be corrected. Again, it has truly been my honor and privilege to serve this community. I wish District 200 and each and every one of you continued success and my heartfelt best wishes.
Well, I have to go back to reading the agenda.
Sorry about that, it's 23 minutes.
You can say it's your retirement party.
I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of discussing appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel of the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel of the public body to determine its validity pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, subparagraph 1. No action is expected following the closed session. Do I have such a motion?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Hanlon,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Mrs. Hutchison, will you please call a roll?
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Berman?
Yes. The open meeting is hereby adjourned. We are now moving into closed session.